Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Cedar.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, September 21st, 2020. My name is Sam Cedar. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, USC Professor of Law Jody Armour on the N-word theory, race, language, unequal justice, and the law. Also on the program today, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, rest in peace. Meanwhile, Trump primed to pick a replacement without delay. The question now is, does Mitch McConnell have the votes? And if he does, for when? Meanwhile, Nancy Pelosi says impeachment is on the table, which could slow things down in the Senate, but she refuses to use the continuing resolution to stop a new Supreme Court pick. The ACA may be toast either way, or it may be not. Half the states are on an uptick for new infections as the CDC reverses on saying that asymptomatic people should not get tests. U.S. says Iran embargo back on. Rest of the world says not so fast. Census could look manipulated, according to the Commerce Department, if Trump gets his way. And the EPA's secret deadline threatens tribal sovereignty out west. Meanwhile, Alex Azar takes control at the FDA, leaving everybody wondering if he's looking to relax standards on vaccines. All this and more on today's program. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Obviously, a very different situation that we're dealing with today than we were on Friday when we ended the program. In many respects, the worst case scenario of the Trump years is staring us in the face. It was not an unpredictable one. We will be playing clips or later in the program where it was predicted. I'm sort of shocked by some of the response on some of what we call the dumb left. I guess I shouldn't be that shocked because they're dumb. But it's also interesting to just watch the just unbelievable lack of accountability. Not so much that anybody in particular is responsible for this. I mean, we're all responsible for it in some fashion or another. It's just when you are so wrong in what you suggest is going to happen, you would expect there to be some measure of humility. Maybe that is naive on my part. It probably is. This also, we'll take a look at this clip. I mean, the first thing that people pointed to when Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away on Rosh Hashanah of all times, was that there were, I believe, something like 17 senators, Republican senators, who had said specifically that we would not confirm a Supreme Court nominee during an election year. This was so that they could maintain some semblance of consistency with their dumb rule in the first place. Frankly, I think it's a stupid rule. You confirm as quickly as you can if you hold the Senate. And I mean, that's the president gets 4 years. This is their term. Even if you were to do it in the lame duck, you suffer the political consequences. However, the problem the Republicans have with this is that they disavowed that principle. Now, hypocrisy is probably one of the biggest losers in terms of politics that exist. I personally think it's silly. As to the extent that it works as political rhetoric, great, use it. In general, I don't think it does that much. The people who want these things done, they want these things done because they are seeking power. That said, if I was running against Cory Gardner or Cornyn or Cruz or Graham or Rubio, not all of these are up for re-election, incidentally, but some of them are. Graham is, Gardner is, Cornyn, Inhofe, Grassley, Ernst is up for re-election. Tillis is up for re-election. Perdue is up for re-election. Tim Scott, Johnson, Toomey, Burr, Blunt, Hoeven, Portman. A couple of these extras are up for re-election. I would certainly be going out and saying they said they would not support confirming a Supreme Court nominee during an election year. And here we are during an election year, not even 2 months away from the election. But people generally don't care about that, at least broadly speaking. In other words, it's not going to stop Lindsey Graham. Now, it may hurt his reelection chances, and that is a valuable thing. Make no mistake about it. But here is Lindsey Graham now he's saying this in a Senate Judiciary hearing in 2016. I'll let you hear how explicit he is about saying that if there is a vacancy because he's trying to justify why they didn't even give Merrick Garland a hearing. But remember, and this is important because there's some dumb people out there who don't understand this. The Republicans controlled the Senate in 2016. They control the Senate now. That's an important thing to recall. They have the presidency now. They didn't have it in 2016. Here is Lindsey Graham in 2016.
This is the last year of a lame duck president. And if Ted Cruz or Donald Trump get to be president, they've all asked us not to confirm or take up a selection by President Obama. So if a vacancy occurs in their last year of their first term, guess what? You will use their words against them. I want you to use my words against me. If there's a Republican president in 2016 and a vacancy occurs in the last year of the first term, you can say, Lindsey Graham said, let's let the next president, whoever it might be, make that nomination, and you could use my words against me, and you'd be absolutely right. We're setting a precedent here today, Republicans are, that in the last year, at least of a lame duck 8-year term, I would say it's going to be a 4-year term, that you're not going to fill a vacancy of the Supreme Court based on what we're doing here today. That's going to be the new rule. When y'all change the rules about appellate judges and district court judges to get your way, I thought it was a really abuse of power. And what you have done here is you've made the caucuses, the Republican and Democratic caucuses, are now not.
I don't need his moralizing after this. He wanted us to use the video and his words against him as you wish. But maybe he changed his mind. Let's go 2 years later, 2018. I believe this is October 3rd, 2018. October 3rd, 2018. October 3rd, 2018. An important date for you to remember. October 3rd, 2018. I'll explain after you hear him reiterate what he said.
October being after September.
Correct.
If an opening comes in the last year of President Trump's term and the primary process is started, we'll wait to the next election. And I've got a pretty good chance of being the judiciary.
You're on the record.
Yeah.
All right.
Hold the tape.
Hold the tape. You're on the record. You've got a pretty good chance of being the judiciary chairman. You are, in fact, now the judiciary chairman. That was October 2018. And I'll tell you why that's so important. Because here is Lindsey Graham tweeting out why he has now suddenly, but according to him, it's not sudden, changed his mind about all that. He has an excuse. Democrats chose to set in motion rules to change to stack the court at the circuit level, and they chose to try to destroy Brett Kavanaugh's life to keep the Supreme Court seat open. You reap what you sow. In other words, that's when he realized they're not playing by the rules, and therefore my comments on September in 2016, and then my comments reiterating in October 3rd of 2018 do not hold because of what we experienced with the Kavanaugh hearings. The problem is the Kavanaugh hearings were a month before he said that on October 3rd. The Kavanaugh hearings ended September 7th, 2018. And he reiterated on October 3rd. Now, what is the value of that? In the great scheme of things, in terms of seating this justice, very little. But if I'm Jamie Harrison and I'm running against Lindsey Graham, it's really just a question of, is Lindsey Graham a liar? Is he lying to the American public? Forget about the politics of this. He's a liar. That may be worth a couple of votes. And that's a close race. But Lindsey Graham is desperate. Tom Tillis is desperate. Cornyn is desperate to a certain extent. Cory Gardner is desperate. Susan Collins just couldn't get away with it. She got released by Mitch McConnell because McConnell probably believes that he has the votes or coming or very close to it. So we will talk later in the program about the narrow opportunity there is to prevent the Senate from holding hearings. There's very little opportunity. There is some opportunity to save the ACA. We will talk about why that is in jeopardy. There's a hearing the SCOTUS is set to review the ACA. Even if John Roberts switches sides, you're looking at a 4-4 tie. That has implications. It gets basically the circuit court ruling holds, but it's a little more complicated than that. But there's something Nancy Pelosi could do to avoid that as well. But she won't. We will talk about that later in the program. It's just a very sad and disastrous situation. There were many people who, starting in 2011, and look, it's unfortunate because we should be exclusively celebrating Ruth Bader Ginsburg. But the reality is, the implications for the living are greater than her legacy at this point. And sadly, her legacy, I think, is going to be marred by her decision to not resign in a way that was very safe for Obama to make a pick. And this goes for Breyer, too. I mean, there were calls for Breyer and Ginsburg's resignations as early as 2011. And then they were reiterated in early in 2013. And I'm talking by, legal commentators who were worried. People who were actually in the courts and seeing that as strong as Ruth Bader Ginsburg was perceived to be in popular culture, you know, she was beginning to fall asleep during some cases, apparently. That's not the reason why you resign. And, you know, it was perfect. She had a lifetime appointment. She could serve that out, and she did. It is unfortunate that we're spending this time worried about the future so immediately and so intensely, and not able to spend the time sort of celebrating her life. But that was also part of her choice. That was also part of the calculation. There was a risk. Again, same with Breyer. They both, you know, you look at like a guy like Anthony Kennedy who said, this is when my leverage is at a peak. I'm going to get my guy on the court and I'm going to step out. And now we are looking at, you know, this is disastrous in multiple ways. You know, 1/4, I think it was it 1/4 of Republicans in the Trump election, their number one issue was that Supreme Court vacancy. So I wouldn't be surprised if Mitch McConnell waits till the lame duck, but who knows? It's really a function of how many votes he thinks he has. He will go for it if he thinks he can do it. Before we get to Professor Armour, a sponsor that was, I was talking about, I'm wearing the socks right now. Well, we'll get into this. I think people who play any type of sports, or really do any type of physical exercise, can understand the difference that like any small change can make in terms of, not just in terms of your performance, but in terms of your judgment. I mean, there's nothing worse than like, oh, I got a new pair of sneakers, I got blisters, or I got a new pair of socks, I got blisters, or whatever it is. Well, changing your socks can make a huge difference in your daily workouts, your daily walks. I don't know if you play golf. Runners worldwide have made Features their sock of choice. And now you can get the same benefits, especially tailored for the golf course, if that's what you play. Now, for me, I'm not a big golfer, but they sent me these socks, and I've been loving them. Features Elite Golf Sock. They keep your feet cool, dry, and blister-free while providing a custom-like fit that won't bunch or slip during your backswing, or frankly, when you're running around the park with your kid playing huckle-muckle, which incidentally I beat him at. They've engineered a sock with targeted compression, anatomical design, and moisture-wicking material for unsurpassed performance. The anatomical design conforms to the left and to the right shape of your feet. They're left and right socks. They create an enhanced custom-like fit that reduces discomfort, prevents blisters, so you can focus on your game, on your running, on your workout. It's a proudly family-owned business founded in 2002 that operates out of North Carolina. Their mission is to create products that help you achieve your personal best. I was talking to Brendan and Matt before the show. I said, you know, these socks are actually really, really good. I'm wearing a pair right now. I got them on. I don't know if you can see that. And they're thin. I'm explaining to Brendan, like they're thin, but they've got like padding, and they feel like they're wrapped around your foot, but it's not digging into my leg. And then Brendan came back with this. Brendan, say, I don't remember what you said, but Brendan's like, they're the best socks ever.
Yeah, I think they're the best socks for the best podcasts. And yeah, I run in them, so I really like them. In the way that Matt can talk about, Sunset Lake, I can talk about Features.
That's right. So were you a sock skeptic at first?
Yeah, I had to be upsold at a running store for good socks, and I am a complete convert at this point, and a evangelical in some ways too. I've already made the determination. I'm getting rid of all my socks except for these, because, you know, these actually, the black ones and these blue ones I have with the pattern on them, and these I could wear these out if I ever
if I ever went to somewhere fancy, which doesn't happen, and they'll be far more comfortable. And in terms of just even walking down here today, they're incredible. It really, honestly, these socks will change how you feel about your socks, probably forever. And now you can get $10 off your first pair of Feetures when you use the code majority at feetures.com. It's FEET, Feeters, URES.com. Use the code majority. That's feetures.com, promo code majority for $10 off your first pair of Feetures. Folks, you will not be disappointed in these socks. Really, honestly, this is like a revelation to me. All right. In the meantime, let's take we don't need to take a break, do we?
Nope.
All right. Well, it's my pleasure to welcome to the program a USC professor of law and author of The N-Word Theory, Race, Language, Unequal Justice, and the Law, Professor Jody David Armour. Welcome to the program, Jody.
Thanks very much for having me, Sam.
So, all right, we got to start with this. I was talking to my daughter about who was a guest on my show. She's 15 years old, and now she's around the house a lot more these days because she's not going to school, or she's doing it from remote. And she's like, "You cannot say the title actually spells the word out, GGA." Yeah. And she said, "You can't say that on air." And I said, "Well, my plan is to ask the professor, like, what, about that." And she said, "Well, just make sure you don't say that on air." And I think like it is, I think I've had a different perspective on the use of the word, even in this context, right? I mean, you've written the book, and it's the name of a theory that you've been working on for, at least half a decade. But yet, so, I mean, talk just about that word in the context of the title and your perspective on where it's appropriate to use that word.
Yeah, that's just a perfect jumping off point, Sam. It is a blood-soaked epithet that has deep roots that run into a painfully racist American past, right? It's been used to denigrate and otherize and demonize Blacks for centuries. And so I use it very advisedly and recognize that there's a lot of pain comes with it. But I also don't subscribe to the claim that any current day applications of that word are poison fruit. They're tainted fruit of the poison etymological tree that has roots in that racist past. I think that some Black artists, for example, Tupac Shakur, Ice Cube, Nas, Hope, there have been artists, Black artists who have appropriated that term and used it as a term of art in a oppositional discourse, right? In a political discourse, in which they're saying, we don't want you to just talk about us. We want to talk about ourselves. We're going to penetrate pop culture with an N-word laden discourse that's uncomfortable and disruptive. That's kind of part of the point of it, right? When I first started using the N-word in the legal academy, I used in the same spirit that Black Lives Matter uses disruption, shut it down. Let's cut through our collective complacency about this festering issue. And sometimes we have to be disruptive to do that. And then let's compel some uncomfortable conversation. So I'm drawing on that Black Lives Matter spirit with this title to challenge us to disrupt our, kind of calcified language of the academy when it comes to mass incarceration and racialized mass incarceration, and get down to the nitty gritty, how we otherize Black people through language and through other means in this culture and country. So I
know there's obviously more to this, but I do find this topic fascinating. One of my heroes as in comedy was Lenny Bruce, and he had a very famous bit where he basically said, we're gonna disempower this word. Essentially, I'm paraphrasing, and I think we could do that if the president came out and basically said, the president of the United States said, "Here is my N-word, Secretary of Defense, and my N-word Secretary of Housing, and my N-word this, and my N-word that," and he just kept repeating the word with the idea that we're going to demystify it. We're going to disempower it. And I mean, my sense is that perspective might have worked at that time, I guess. But in some ways, we've achieved a sort of like a different level of consciousness that it's not just intent. And I think this has happened for me too over the years, because in very narrow circumstances 10 years ago, I would have used this like in public, on the radio, to make a specific point or to retell something that I'm not so sure I'm so comfortable with today, just because of a different awareness. But so it's not just the intent. There's a whole set of criteria that contextualize it. Is that right?
Absolutely. I love that, and that's the title is meant to provoke that kind of reflection all the time, constantly, ongoingly, right? But I like your reference to the comedian Lenny Bruce, because that's also part of the inspiration for my title, Sam. You know, the N-word, you know, some people say the GGA version is not the bad version. It's the GGER version. You know, that's the bad version. And in some way, when you hear a routine by someone like Chris Rock to launch his comedic career in the mid '90s, a routine called "Bring the Pain," he goes back and forth in front of all black audience and saying the following routine. I'll censor the N-word a little bit in here. He says it's like a civil war going on in Black America, and there's two sides. There's black people and there's N-words, and N-words have got to go. I love black people, but I hate N-words. Boy, I wish they'd let me join the Ku Klux Klan. I do a drive-by from here to Brooklyn. And he goes on like that for a half hour, distinguishing between lovable black people and morally condemnable N-words. And his core definition of an N-word, of an N-I-G-G-A, is a black criminal. So by that definition, Sam, the up to 90% of young black males, tragically, who are going to wind up in jail, on probation, or on parole in some of these inner city neighborhoods are N-words. We're willing to accept a political invitation implicit in a punchline that invites that distinction within the black community. And we all laugh at that, amen, laugh at the punchline and embrace it. So that's what this book is also about, attacking any kind of distinction between the worthy and the wicked based on a criminal record, even a violent criminal record. And I think the N-word is one of the words in the English language. It's unique in the English language. It's unparaphrasable, and it otherizes its referent probably more than any other word in the English language. So I want to attack that otherization. I want to eliminate distinctions between good Negroes, bad Negroes, lovable black people, morally condemnable NIGGAs.
I mean, in many respects, that Chris Rock performance, that bit, is really sort of the fundamental manifestation of, I guess, maybe the catalyst or the need for the N-word theory that you've written about.
That's it. You put that you hit it squarely. And
so there's two things that strike me about that, and I wonder if well, and let me see if I can articulate this. So it seems to me that what Chris Rock is doing in that bit is he is making a class distinction, right? And a class that is fundamentally economic. I mean, by class, I don't mean category. I mean class as the way that we speak about as class. And I wonder if, okay, so that's one thing there. And he's making that class distinction in front of a black audience.
Yes.
And then I'm curious as to how that class distinction gets communicated and maybe transformed or within a broader society dominated by white people. Like, you know, if that is a class distinction within the black community, what happens to that as it comes out into the white community as well?
Yeah, spot on. You know, what is really going on, I try to drive home in this book, is a lot of these moral distinctions are really class distinctions masquerading as moral distinctions. It just so happens, Sam, that when you look at the crime rates for middle-class black Americans and middle-class white Americans, they're roughly the same. So really, most of the folks that Chris Rock would be pointing to that are blacks who are involved in crime are from truly disadvantaged backgrounds. They're truly disadvantaged blacks. So what Chris Rock might just as well as say is, I love disproportionately middle-class blacks, and I hate disproportionately truly disadvantaged blacks, right? I love disproportionately privileged black Brahmins, the black bourgeoisie, and I hate the disproportionately truly disadvantaged black, because that's the numbers. You just look at you just crunch the numbers, right? And I even see it here in my neighborhood in LA, which I live in View Park. It's called Black Beverly Hills. And I've had some of my neighbors say, when I and some of my sons have had friends from other neighborhoods like Compton, Watts, et cetera, visit us, I've had neighbors say, we don't want Watts up here. We don't want South Central up here, right? So there's an economically gated mentality that can develop even among the black bourgeoisie that I've seen point blank. So it is about both class and race, but the thing is, you can't reduce race to class, because as Stevie Wonder once said, you might make big cash, but you cannot cash in your face. And the face of crime for millions of Americans is black, and that's why you see so many black Brahmins, the rage of the privileged class. Ellis Coast had a book out years ago about all these black doctors and lawyers who are high achievers who are still getting racially profiled, and they were enraged by it. So even though you make a lot of money, you cannot escape the black tax in that way.
I mein, it's interesting because, using my own experience, there is a concept in, I guess, cultural Judaism, like this is good for the Jews or bad for the Jews. Like there is, Bernie Madoff was really upsetting to, my relatives, because it's bad for the Jews to have a Jew come out and do this, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like how much of that is going on in this dynamic, and how much does that dynamic then end up? I think you just articulated it, but I'm just curious to pull that out a little bit more. That dynamic where it's like, why do you and I have to be conjoined in the same community? I'm going to try and cleave us as much as possible. But unfortunately, what happens is that comes back around and you don't have control of your fate in that context.
That's again, man, that's right on, because one of the things I drive home in this book is that it's been in the black community for a long time, a politics of respectability. It worked back in the civil rights era, in which the black community said, many rather leaders in the black community said, our racial reputation in the eyes of whites is very important. We have to do all we can do to enhance our racial reputation in the eyes of whites, because they are policymakers. They are decision makers. They are deciding the fate of our community. And so we have to look good in their eyes so that they'll make favorable judgments when they're balancing those competing interests, right? So that means that you have to, as a community, in the interest of the community, distinguish and distance yourself as much as possible from bad Negroes. If you're a good Negro, law-abiding Negro, you distinguish and distance yourself from them bad Negroes for the sake of our racial reputation, for the good of the community, right? Now, Black Lives Matter rejected that approach, rejected that MO and that way of looking at the world. And that's why you had some tension between old civil rights establishment folks and BLM for sometimes, right? Because BLM said, no, a lot of these victims of police violence aren't morally immaculate, if you will. Yes, Eric Garner was selling Lucy's on the sidewalk. Okay, yes, Walter Scott was running away from a police officer because, maybe because he hadn't paid past child support. They aren't, but you should not have to be, Dudley damn do-right in order to have minimum respect, as a human being, and be treated with a minimum degree of respect by state actors who are acting under color of law in the name of us all, right? Police officers, right? So I think Black Lives Matter really went after that politics of respectability approach to civil rights, and it's been fabulously successful. And it's one of the things I'm trying to stress in the book as well, Sam.
Yes. Okay. So that raises a couple of other issues too, is because it seems to me that Barack Obama practiced an inordinate amount of respectability politics, that there was, and which makes a lot of sense in the context of the way that he was viewed and what he was supposedly represented, et cetera, et cetera. And I wonder how much of BLM's change, of that understanding of like, because when I hear the respectability politics, as you describe it in the context of this, of the civil rights struggle, there's a parallel track of like Clean for Gene, right? Like that was happening at the time too, but it was within the context of the white world. And it was not in some ways weaponized in the way to cleave off, although there is still, we still have this concept of hippie punching, I guess, within the context of the Democratic Party, but it was still not weaponized in the exact same way that it's been weaponized in the Black community. And where you have Barack Obama saying like, the real problem is that Black men have to deal with their kids, or, you got to be your brother's keeper stuff. And it creates this dynamic that like, if there was a white version of Barack Obama, that guy, you could only be Barack Obama if you were that version of a person, right? Incredibly articulate, amazingly eloquent, good looking, just all that has the great story, et cetera, et cetera. You can attain what Barack Obama did, obviously, if you're far less sort of, I guess, of a person than Obama. I mean, look at Donald Trump that's the whole point, right? Is that like, you're not being measured in the same, within the same spectrum, I guess.
I couldn't agree more. I really agree. Barack Obama really illustrates the limits of respectability politics, approaches to social problems and civil rights for Black folks in, the modern times, because a lot of people after his election were talking about we're in a post-racial America, right? And it was on his watch that Black Lives Matter was birthed, right? And it's because of the kinds of limits that were on his version of change and progress. And, you're right. He did go down to Morehouse and at their graduation lecture these, graduating young Black men who had exhibited great personal responsibility to get to graduation day, irrespective of whatever, one of the most respected Black, historically Black colleges in the country. They worked hard to get there. And he lectured them on, not making excuses and embracing personal responsibility. He didn't lecture the, other college students when he was at other campuses, when he wasn't talking to Black, predominantly Black audiences, right? So yeah, that politics of respectability way of thinking about things is holding us back. And we're never going to be able to make, this is one of the other main points in this book, Sam, we're never going to make deep cuts and racialized mass incarceration from that perspective, because contrary to what Michelle Alexander said in the new Jim Crow, most incarceration is not driven by low-level nonviolent drug offenders. Most people in state prisons, which is where 87% of prisoners reside, most of them are there for violent and serious offenses. It would be so much easier if they were just low-level nonviolent drug offenders. Yes, we could all come to an easy consensus on, yes, we should release them, right? What makes deep cuts and racialized mass incarceration so challenging is that isn't the case, factually, right? And that's what I'm trying to correct, that factual error at the heart of Michelle Alexander's new Jim Crow, that really it's low-level nonviolent drug offenders that accounts for the explosion from 1980 of 300,000 prisoners to 2.2 million in the aughts. No, it's violent offenders and serious offenders. That's a sad reality. And we need a new moral framework, a new compass, a new politics, and a new a way of thinking about law to accommodate that reality if we really want to make deep cuts in racialized mass incarceration.
So it's basically challenging the notion that this is going to be easy and fit into sort of it's questioning it's basically saying that the injustice is not in, I guess, who is in prison. The injustice is in what society has constructed, that the prisons are sort of like a second order, almost manifestation of that problem that is being obscured. If you only look at like, there's only low level of, that you're worried about the low level offenders.
Yes, it allows you to achieve deep cuts in mass incarceration on the cheap. And I'm saying you can't do it on the cheap. You know, you're going to have, you can't do it comfortably within your conventional moral framework. You're going to have to move away from retribution, retaliation, and revenge as your primary way of thinking about violent and serious offenders, which is how we've been doing it for the last 30, 40, 50 years, and move toward restoration, redemption, reconciliation, rehabilitation. Right? That's a kind of fundamental shift. You're going to have to tame the retributive urge that you feel to punish, wrongdoers. I'll give you one quick example, Sam. When Amber Geiger shot Botham John, a young black man sitting in Dallas. She was a white police officer, came in the wrong apartment. He was eating ice cream, stepped it up, shot him dead. She made a negligent mistake. She thought she was going into her apartment. She was on the wrong floor, right? I'll go in and say that was a negligent, stupid mistake, right? But a lot of people on my timeline elsewhere were saying, she deserves a murder conviction, which is what she ultimately got. And I was saying, well, manslaughter, I think, would be enough. Really, it was dumb, but for negligent and even reckless homicides, typically manslaughter is what we do. And I understand the urge because you have a victim from a socially marginalized group and you have a victimizer from kind of a dominant group, and you want to, show that you care for the victim's rights by, punishing the victimizer as much as possible. But we're never going to make deep cuts in mass incarceration if we have that attitude toward Amber Geiger, because it's going to hurt more blacks than non-blacks, because blacks are the ones disproportionately swept up in the criminal justice system. So we have to tame that retributive urge, even when it hurts, even when we don't want to a lot of times, even when it's victimizers from more dominant groups. We still have to work on a new moral compass.
Okay, so if I mean, and frankly, though, I mean, I can hear a lot of people saying like, okay, why should we? Right? I mean, from like, why should we as a society, not have some measure of like to be overly, to be oriented in that way towards people who commit violent crime? Like, why should we?
Right. That's exactly it. For a long time, we say, look, these are people who are sometimes preying on the most vulnerable members of their own society, of our own community, right? Why shouldn't we just, treat them as so much toxic human waste and dump them and forget about them, right? We tried that for 30 years, Sam, and look at what it got us, right? It hasn't, we haven't been making progress with these problems. For one thing, these people do come back out eventually, right? And we want them to come back out and be, feel like they have a stake in our society still, that they have something to get up for and to strive for. And so, I hear that, but I also recognize that what I hear people saying all the time is redemption, reconciliation, restoration, especially in my faith, Sam. My mother was Catholic. I was raised in that tradition of, on Sunday mornings, you're talking redemption, reconciliation, restoration. And then Monday through Saturday, people go back to retribution, retaliation, and revenge. Right. And then Sunday, they're redemption, restore. I want to take Sunday from that my tradition and spread it throughout the week. Have the same moral compass throughout the week.
But so is it a moral argument or is it an efficacy argument? Or is it both?
Good, both. It's absolutely both. I sometimes I have to make the efficacy argument to folks who can't get to the moral argument, because a lot of times some of the studies I go into the book suggest that you don't really feel like making allowances for someone unless you empathize with them. And at an unconscious level, we just don't empathize with Black people, right? If you're not, I have these studies like when you look at what happened in Hurricane Katrina, with those Black people standing on those rooftops for 4 days with water up to their neck. Not 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, Sam. 4 days in, Sean Penn was rolling in, handing out fresh water because FEMA still couldn't get it act together. Compare that response. Those Black lives didn't matter. They didn't generate empathy. They didn't generate a panic of empathy. Compare that response to what happened after 9/11 when those planes ran into those buildings. There was a panic of empathy for those victims. Nobody wanted to hear about any red tape, bureaucratic impediments. We just got it done, right? And that's what, is really depressingly coming out of these studies that I look at in this book, that when I walk down Skid Row here in LA, for example, the fiercest expression of structural violence in America, Sam, the highest concentration of homeless folk in America, you look around you, 75% of the faces are black. Not people of color, black. And that's basically Hurricane Katrina. You have families out there, tents over there. That's basically people in the Ninth Ward with water up to their neck, not just for 4 days, for year after year, right? And we don't have any panic of empathy for them. And and it's at the level of the unconscious, and I talk about that.
And I mean, so if I was to accept the efficacy argument and the moral argument, or one or the other, frankly, for that matter, how does this play out in a policy level? How does it play out? I mean, you're an attorney as well. I mean, how does this play out in a courtroom perspective? I know that, like, you touch on the challenge of how you must approach a jury to get them to sort of recognize that they're dealing with a human being, essentially. But how does this play out in the context of policy? Like, what if we did as a society more or less come to the idea of, like, okay, yeah, this is horribly inefficient. This is not working. And there are fall-on effects from this. And to a certain extent, we should talk about your dad on some level as well. But, like, when we put these people away, it's not efficient, but it also creates a lot of suffering that's going on, that ripples out from this. And it implicates individuals and family members, and then the broader community and whatnot. It's also, expensive, and and then there's the moral argument. How do we address that from a policy standpoint?
Great. I think starting from a morality standpoint, first and foremost, when we accept that we cannot really judge another's just desserts. I make all kinds of arguments on why we should have epistemic humility about our capacity to judge another's subjective culpability, their just desserts. Once we accept that epistemic humility, number one, then we have to end the death penalty, right? Because, doubt, Sam, may give your dinner a funny taste, but it's the lack of doubt that goes out and kills. It's the lack of doubt that straps a bomb on her back and walks into the middle of a crowd and detonates. And it's the lack of doubt that straps down a citizen in a chair and injects them with gas or in some other kind of way. So number one, get rid of the death penalty. Number two, Sam, I'm going to be practical. I would say that whatever the crime, I don't care what the crime is. I'm sorry to say it, but whatever the crime, at 12 years, you get a parole hearing. That doesn't mean you get out in 12 years. At 12 years, you get a parole. In Europe and even here in years past in the United States, we had a much different kind of punishment schedule. We've let it go through the roof. We hand out 25 to life like they're candy from a Pez dispenser, on the bench with that gavel. And so, those kind of concrete interventions are the kind of thing, Sam.
I think people would be surprised to hear, like, is it typical that people don't get a parole hearing in the first 10, 12 years? Oh, yeah. They can go 25, 35, 45 before they even think about seeing a parole board. They may never see a parole board, right, in other cases, right, period. So many cases, actually. So, it is, I understand, I understand how let me just put it this way. I understand how much we feel the suffering of the victim. I took my students up to San Quentin. I take them used to on a regular basis, and we sit down with lifers without parole, mothers of murder victims for a day. And here's how it would go, Sam. The mothers of murder victims, the session would go, stand up and say, this is my loved one ripped from me by murder, somebody like you in this room, right? And this is what it did to our family. And it's heart-rending. And she'll pass the pictures around and things like that, and we'll sit there with that, Sam. And then one of the lifers will stand up. And let's say he has 10 minutes, he'll spend the first 5 minutes saying, here's the person who I killed, and here's the family I tore apart by that death. And we'll pass that picture around if we have to. We'll sit with that. And then he'll take his last 5 minutes to say, the person who did that act was a depraved individual.
Let me tell you how I became that depraved individual. Let me tell you about the foster care. Let me tell you about the cigarette burn. Let me tell you about being put in a car trunk for 6 hours at a time for discipline. Let me tell you about the molestation. Let me tell you about how I got to be that person. And we sit there, Sam, and we realize that the distinction between victims and victimizers isn't so clear. You know, hurt people, right? And that kind of nuance, we feel the victim's pain, we feel everyone's pain. That's what we got to strive for to really achieve justice in our criminal justice system. That's what I'm trying to get at in this book.
And how do we intervene in the construction of that lifer before they become a lifer? Like how do we not construct someone who is going on to be a victimizer?
Right. We lift them out of those criminogenic conditions before they produce crime, right? If you have stomach rumbling, Sam, you know, and you don't know where your next meal is going to come from, temptation is much more likely to compel you to do something that's outside the boundaries of the law. If we all want a safer society, we've decided that we're going to achieve a safer society. We decided this, maybe after the Great Society experiments of the 60s, we decided that we are going to solve, instead of addressing our social problems head on, we're going to cut the social safety net like Clinton did in the 90s and spend more at the same time on police and jails, right? And so we're going to use the criminal law to deal with poverty. Our poverty governance is we're going to use police and batons and jail cells to address poverty issues rather than making us all safer by making sure we have affordable housing, that we don't have crumbling schools, that we have adequate health care for everyone. And instead of bringing down crime in that way, that's also a safety measure. We spend on more police and more jails and more prisons, right? And because we don't see the connection between our basic social structure and those crimes. You know, a lot of times we just say those are bad people making bad choices rather than we've plunked them down in a situation where all they have is bad choices.
I mean, in many respects, this dynamic is analogous to the way that we look towards education and frankly, and healthcare on some level too. It's like we create circumstances that are going to cause problems and then try and fix them on the back end. Very often people make profit off of and whatnot. Just before we go, just tell your story, if you would, of your father and which I think has informed your perspective on this. And I don't know, you would know better than I, obviously, but I think in many ways, you know, led you to this trajectory of your career and your life.
Absolutely, Sam, you did. You know, my dad, when I was 8 years old, speaking of family separation has been going on as part of the American criminal justice process for many decades, right? I lost my dad when I was 8 years old when police kicked in our door and arrested him. He was convicted for a possession sale of marijuana and given 22 to 55 years. He was looking at, really rotting in a jail cell because he was going to be one of those uppity black men who was going to do all 55, right? So his only exit was to reach up on the warden's own law library shelves, pull down law books about criminal law, constitutional law, and criminal procedure, teach himself all of those subjects, writing his own writs of habeas corpus and representing himself pro se up through the state system, through the federal system, until I was standing next to him as a 14-year-old when he was in the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals in Cincinnati, which is where the Underground Railroad came up, by the way. You know, black bodies in bondage found freedom there. Well, my dad was a black body in bondage who found freedom in the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeal when he made his own argument to an en banc panel of judges. And I now teach his case in my criminal law course. It's called Armour versus Salisbury. And it stands for the proposition that a DA cannot intentionally and deliberately lie to a jury to get a conviction against the defendant. So that is what he's taught me, the power of word work, Sam. At the end of the day, all he had was language. And at the end of the day, using words, putting words in the right order, his cell door was flung open. Found the key to his own jail cell in the warden's law books.
It's an amazing story, and I wonder, and just as a side note, and I guess, well, what do you make of what we're seeing? It's very nascent, but it's real. the reform movement amongst prosecutors. You have Krasner in Philadelphia, Chiesa Boudin in San Francisco.
Yes.
There are others too, I think, that are escaping. What is your sense of that?
It's a sea change, Sam. I'm so heartened by it because they're only there because the voters put them there. Larry Krasner got 75% of the vote in Philadelphia in the general election, having never prosecuted a case in his life, been a public defender and defense attorney, and running on the following platform: end cash bail, address police misconduct, end mass incarceration. And he got 75% of the vote. Chiesa Boudin, one up in San Francisco, as you said. So that I have more faith in the voters than ever right now when it comes to these issues, more actually than in some of the politicians who have to catch up to some of the voters now.
All right. And lastly, obviously, we just lost a Supreme Court justice. I'm curious as to your perspective on that. If you have anything to add, I mean, it's not necessarily right in your portfolio, but I imagine there's very likely going to implicate your work. There are going to be findings by that Supreme Court ultimately that are going to implicate what you do. What's your sense of where we're at and how, I guess, maybe just in terms of like, when something like this happens, do you start to think that like the reforms are going to have to come statutorily and politically because this door has been shut for, generations?
That's exactly it. Rather than curse the gloom, Sam, I prefer to light a match and think about the fact that the Supreme Court hasn't actually done as much as people think to promote racial justice, right? After Brown versus Board of Education, we had Brown versus Board of Education, great, integration, great. Look at where we still are, Sam. Look at Skid Row, as I was telling you. Look at our prisons. Look at the income gap between blacks and whites hasn't actually improved over 50 years, and wealth and all kinds of other measures. So the Supreme Court route isn't necessarily the one to put all your eggs in anyway, or even a lot of them. Getting in on the local level, the local DA's race, the local sheriff's race, the city council race, that's where the action really is. And I think this will help focus attention there, hopefully.
Professor Jody David Armour, the book is The N-Word Theory, Race, Language, Unequal Justice, and the Law. We'll put a link to that at majority.fm. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Sam.
Thank you. All right, folks. We will take a quick break and head into the fun half of the program. We've got a lot to talk about, obviously. We're going to be context of some things. I think, criminal justice reform and racial equality is one of those things that I think it has to happen within the context of society and has to happen statutorily to a large extent. I think addressing some of the underlying issues of how it is that we end up constructing criminals essentially as a society, and the underlying structures that we have in terms of our problems with our education or in the context of our healthcare. The Supreme Court's not necessarily going to help, but they can certainly hurt. I don't know what's going to happen with the Affordable Care Act. It's conceivable that if it is struck down, that the next bite out of the apple is going to be far more aggressive. I would hope, if that is the case. I mean, I hope it either way, but it's also conceivable that a 5-4, a 6-3 Supreme Court could simply say, yeah, no, Medicare for all, that's not constitutional. So, scary times we're headed into, never mind the implications for the election in and of itself. So, very disturbing times. We will talk about Nancy Pelosi. There are two separate issues here. What can Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer do to to stop the appointment of another justice. It's limited, but there are scenarios that could maybe work. They have to be balanced against losing the election, right? Because you lose the election, it doesn't matter if you stop the pick before the inauguration, if Donald Trump becomes president. But there are things that I think Nancy Pelosi can try in terms of saving the Affordable Care Act. We will talk about that in the fun half. We will also talk about some of the individual races around the country. That is going to be implicated, particularly the Senate ones. We will look at maybe some different reactions to this. And Donald Trump, meanwhile, is out and about doing these, big rallies. Some inside. We'll see. We will take a quick break. Just a reminder, this program relies on your support. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you support the free half of the program, and you also get extra content every day. So become a member today. Jointhemajorityreport.com. Also, we have swag. Now, Brendan is back, and so he's the first thing on his docket is he's so obsessed about those pencils. It's crazy. He's going to check on those. But if you go to shop.majorityreportradio.com, you can check out our swag. Also, the AM Quickie, amquickie.com, or you can just find the free podcast. It's all free on any of your podcast services, as it were. And don't forget, 3 p.m. today. Is it 3 p.m. today? Or is it, I gotta get this straight. My head is a mess. The No McKee Show. You can find that at youtube.com/The No McKee Show or patreon.com/The No McKee Show. Also, Jamie, what's happening on the Intifada?
Hello.
Hello.
This week on the Antifada, we had on a friend we met on Twitter. His name's Aaron Thorpe, a.k.a. Posadist Trap God, and we had a very good conversation. This guy is so good. Apparently, he watches the Majority Report, and that's how he found us, which is pretty cool.
I follow him on Twitter.
That I was not laughing at the Posadist Trap God. It's a funny handle.
It's good, right? He's
I think it's funny that Sam knows. I think it's funny that Sam knows what all those words mean.
I mean, I'm not sure I do, frankly, but I sort of do.
That's enough. Yeah, it's he's really cool. I thought his tweets were pretty good. I thought they were, shall we say, epic. I never saw a tweet from him I thought was cringe. So we had him on and we talked about the Supreme Court stuff a little bit. We talked about the city of Atlanta, where he lives. We talked about the Black misleadership class and some of his views on that. And we also talked about what's up with all these white people pretending to be Black. So I think it was a very good episode that's coming out on Wednesday, patreon.com/The Antifada.
Are there a lot of people doing that, or is it just like, I know there was that most recent woman they found.
I think several is the.
I think there've been 3 so far, but 2 of them just happened in the last few weeks or so. So perhaps
I didn't realize it was 2 in the last few weeks.
Yeah, the trend is accelerating. So
or people are getting caught at a more rapid rate.
Yeah, maybe.
Matt.
On TMBS this week, we have assistant professor at the University of Utah for economics, Marshall Steinbaum. We're going to have him on to talk about why we should distrust calls for sectoral bargaining coming from moderate Republicans and sort of corporatist Democrats. And we're going to talk about...
that Joe Lieberman's son may be responsible for the loss in Georgia.
Yeah.
That's God.
We should have him on. Brendan, we should book him.
Yeah.
Lieberman's son?
Yeah.
Oh,
That could be a funny interview.
Life imitates art.
I mean, you played him once. Tech, but we're also going to be talking to Marshall about tech buying academic legitimizers. And then the real reason I want him on, we're going to talk about how Nancy McLean was right. All that and more at patreon.com/TMBS. Also, twitch.tv/literary hangover. I took to the skies in Flight Simulator over the weekend. So yeah, that was pretty fun.
All right. You're in the skies. Folks, quick break, fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Almost says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
I am a total cunt.
Can we bring back DJ Dannerky's song, please?
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Dannerky.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break for people.
That's fucking nonsense.
Hey, folks, reminder.
I do not have Parkinson's.
And the alpha males are...
Psych. Fuck them.
Almost says what? Almost says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black. African. And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on! Fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday! Happy birthday to me, Jew boy!
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are back. Africans are black.
Come on! Come on! Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We got to figure out what that setting is where you don't have to ask me to unmute me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't like it?
No.
A bit aggressive?
No, like what am I doing? It's not like I'm doing anything that I'm like, well, I don't want to be unmuted. I don't want anybody to know what I'm, I don't want anybody hear my talking to myself.
It's just a nice little reminder.
I will never figure out how to unmute myself when I start talking on a Zoom call. I feel like I do it every single time.
I feel like you're pretty good at it now. Like
well, thank you.
You joined the call without either your mic or video started, which is, I think, a pretty pro move. I think a lot of people come in hot with the video and then act confused and then turn their video off.
Yeah, well, it's this is the new normal now, so we all have to get good at Zoom.
Oh. There was a funny I got that it just the screen just it was. Somebody asked me. I think it was Assy McGee. Was it exciting when the TV was invented? Was it better than your parlor radio? That made me laugh.
Oh, because you're old.
Yes, it's true. I feel like I've aged like just endlessly in the past couple of days, even. Sam Massachusetts says, Sam, I have $500 I want to put to a Trump defeating use. What should I do? Donate to the Pennsylvania Dems, Wisconsin Dems, something else? Those are two good choices. The parties there. I mean, the Wisconsin Democrats are really on the ball. Pennsylvania Dems, I'm not 100% sure about that one, to be honest with you. But I don't know. Supporting someone like Jamie Harrison, who is not going to vote in a way that I'm going to be terribly excited about in South Carolina, but definitely going to vote better than Lindsey Graham. That might be a good race to invest in.
Teresa Greenfield in Iowa against Joni Ernst people are talking about that one as well. That one is like in the sights.
Too.
Yeah.
Yep. McMorrow, I had about 2 minutes to reflect on the achievements and life of RBG before I was enveloped in despair over what was meant for our country. Sure enough, something like 45 minutes later, I saw Mitch McConnell's statement. Yeah, I mean, I feel badly about that on some level, but I also think that the reality is it was a mistake for her. The choice that she made, I think, was a mistaken one. And I don't not spend the time, celebrating her legacy because of that. This is not a question of a punishment or whether she deserves it or not. This was predictable. This scenario was predictable. In fact, frankly, I'm surprised she made it this far. Actuarially speaking, I'm surprised that Breyer has made it this far. And it was close, right? I mean, it was close. It's really, it's incredibly disturbing. All right, so let's go to get a clear picture on this, right? There's multiple elements that are involved in this in Ginsburg's death. There is the implications of the court 1, 5, 10 years out, 20 years out, 30 years out. I think 30 years out is a safe, maybe 40 years out is a safe time to sort of stop, right? I mean, we have a bunch of 40-year-olds on the court. I think 1 or 2 early 50s. This is, it's going to be a problem for generations. The Supreme Court theoretically could stop anything that we talk about on this program in terms of like single-payer healthcare, in terms of taxation, wealth tax, or these can all be stopped by the Supreme Court. There are measures that can be taken. We'll talk about the idea of court packing. We'll talk about the ideas of reform to the courts, but that is trickier to do when you have a Supreme Court that might, in the best case scenario where you have Democrats controlling all 3 branches and they are able to reinvigorate the Voting Rights Act, the Supreme Court could find another problem with it. I mean, there's a whole host of things that reforms, may or may not address. You could see court packing, but and that face I'm looking at is just sort of like, I hate to rely on the Democrats to get bold because that's a little bit of a fool's errand.
No, Biden explicitly said he would not pack the courts.
Well, Lindsey Graham explicitly said, I would not have a confirmation hearing in the last year of an election year. I mean, politicians say things and sometimes circumstances change.
I think it's a little different with Biden and this.
I mean, it might be. I don't know. But circumstances change. Joe Biden doesn't want to get into office and be able to do nothing, but we'll see. The other implications are the short-term ones in terms of like the Affordable Care Act. I mean, there are cases that are going to be heard between now and when the next justice sits. And in the best case scenario for the left-leaning side of the court, John Roberts comes over and votes with them. And even if he does, it's 4-4. So if they're responding to a case that's been decided in a specific way, in a specific circuit court, then that ruling holds. Now, with the ACA, it's a little bit more complicated than that. And then, of course, there are electoral implications. I think I said earlier, at least a quarter of Republican voters voted for Donald Trump because their number one issue was the Supreme Court. Now, that may shift now, but the left has done such a piss poor job of talking about being aware of the relevance of the court, the implications of the court. You see it in the context of how the left did not push Obama to fill the seats that he could have when he was president. You see it in the context of like how much has Donald Trump been able to, put 200 people on the federal judiciary. How much does that come up in the conversations on the left? A little bit, but only because it's so unprecedented. Like it's an amazing record, frankly. Historians will look at this era for decades and say Donald Trump was able to achieve something that no president has ever been able to do. He has fundamentally reshaped the federal judiciary in such a way that it's bat crap crazy. And so, these are all, so it's hard to know what it's going to mean electorally. But let's go to Nancy Pelosi. Let's take the bigger issue first. Is there a way for Democrats to stop the Republicans from seating a Supreme Court justice between now and the election or between now and the inauguration, presuming it's Joe Biden who wins the election? This is the thing you have to keep in mind. This is the calculation. Because if you do something that keeps them from seating the Supreme Court justice and it causes Biden to lose the election, it doesn't matter. But here is Nancy Pelosi asked by George Stephanopoulos on ABC this week. What's the plan?
Time. Of course, you're the Speaker of the House, not a member of the Senate. Is there any way Democrats can slow this nomination down or block it?
Well, as you say, that is a matter for the Senate. But I will say this. It's really important for everyone to get out there and vote. The day that Justice passed away, 10 states started early voting that day. We just want everyone across the country who cares about health care for all Americans, who cares about crushing the coronavirus, who cares about a woman's right to choose, who cares about LGBTQ rights. The list goes on and on to vote. The election is very important. Let me just remind that when we had the Lilly Ledbetter case before the Supreme Court, the court ruled against women in the workplace. Justice Ginsburg wrote the dissent. That dissent became the Lilly Ledbetter law that was the first bill signed by Barack Obama. So the Congress has the ability to overturn the injustices that spring from the Supreme Court. And that's why we have to have a big turnout in this election. not for politics, not for anything other than what it means to people in their homes, in their lives.
You are in the middle of negotiations over government funding. The government runs out of funding at the end of September. Is there any way you can use leverage in those negotiations to slow this nomination down?
Well, none of us has any interest in shutting down government. That has such a harmful and painful impact on so many people in our country. So I would hope that we can just proceed with that. There is some enthusiasm among some exuberance on the left to say, let's use that, but we're not going to be shutting down government. I do hope, though, that the focus on health care and what it means in terms of the courts will have public opinion be of such magnitude that the Republicans will finally address the coronavirus crisis, finally subscribe to a plan to crush the virus, to listen to scientists about testing, tracing, treatment, mask wearing, sanitation, ventilation, social distancing. Why have we not adopted that as a country? That is a place where we can slow the growth and perhaps crush this virus. Instead, well, I don't want to go into instead. You know what instead.
Yeah. Okay. So there's George Stephanopoulos, exuberant leftist, pointing out that you could actually stop this. And that is, you have a continuing resolution that you have agreed to make a clean resolution with Steve Mnuchin so that the government remains funded. I mean, you see what the problem is here politically, is that the message is a little bit muddled. This is the worst thing that could possibly happen. This is a takeover that's going to implicate us for decades. But I'm not going to shut down the, I mean, I could put it in, but you have to be an exuberant leftist to think that we would want to leverage shutting down the government, because that's only happened, I don't know, half a dozen times in the past 10 years. The government shut down. Maybe that's too many. Maybe it was 4. Like this, it's like shutting down the government is an extreme move, but it's not one that's like unprecedented. It's happened in my 7-year-old's lifetime multiple times.
It's been modeled for us.
And exactly, like we learned it from you, not so much her, but from the politicians. So it is not a wackadoodle, let's, mint the coin solution. I'm referring to the idea of like, we can mint a platinum coin and pay off the debt. The Treasury can do that. Here's a $1 trillion coin or whatever it is. I happen to think that that's actually okay too. But this idea of shutting down the government to stop something that you say is an egregious assault on sort of our norms that will lead to a fundamentally undemocratic outcome. I think to say that it's the exuberant left is, it's just BS. I mean, it's just BS. Of course it's BS. Let's just leave that, put a stake in that. The other theory is go out and vote. She is betting, and it could be a decent bet, that that Mitch McConnell does not have the votes to do this before the election, that he will only have the votes to do this after the election, but that if Mark Kelly in Arizona is elected, he will get into the Senate early because it's a special election. And that means one less Republican that you need to peel off, and there's a better chance in the lame duck. Now, she doesn't know the vote count in the Senate. So it's quite possible that Mitch McConnell does have the votes, in which case the continuing resolution is the only opportunity to do this. You could bring impeachment hearings against Donald Trump again, or Bill Barr. And that also takes precedence in terms of parliamentary procedure. It takes precedence over everything. The Senate does not have, they have no options there. So you could just eat up the clock that way. I don't know if that works. In the context of going into the election, I don't know if impeachment as a tactic when you've already sworn it off before the election is advisable, frankly. The time to do that was, back in January and make a proper impeachment. But I don't know. Shutting down the government, I am not convinced that is an electoral loser in the way that Nancy Pelosi is. Do I understand the concern? Yes, because again, if Biden loses, all this is moot anyways.
Well, they might as well try.
Well, I mean, the issue is that if you try and it causes Biden to lose, then you're screwed. Right? I mean, more screwed than you are if Biden wins and they seat somebody, because then at least you have, okay, now you need to pack the court. But if Biden loses, they're going to seat that person, and then they're going to seat Breyer's seat. And then they're going to replace Thomas with a 40-year-old. And then done. Done.
And I would be surprised if it were a factor in the election. I feel like most people are barely aware of what's going on in the news from day to day, but I don't know.
I mean, shutting down the government? I don't know. I mean, you remember the last one? The last one was broken by the airline stewards, the airline attendants union.
Hell yeah.
And and I imagine they would be aligned with this effort in some respects. But the fact of the matter is that it starts to create pressure on people. Now, the government could shut down, and you could have the president say, okay, the CDC cannot operate. We're not going to get a vaccine. We had a vaccine. We were about to send it out to everybody. We were all going to live our lives normally. Can't do it because the government's been shut down. Nancy Pelosi has kept you from getting a vaccine. That is a reality. Like I'm a little agnostic on that question. That is a reality that they could spin, and it would be not a bad pitch from the Republicans in that case.
Yeah.
Right?
It's all a partisan battle. People are going to vote for who they agree with, regardless of the tactics.
If the answer is that none of it matters, then none of it matters, and it doesn't matter. But I do think, I mean, there is an argument. I'm just looking for a counter argument to that. That people don't react to the government shutting down, and the idea that they don't. If the story is that the vaccine's being prevented from being released because the Democrats are upset about the Supreme Court, I mean, what
people don't trust the vaccine if it comes out before Election Day. Democrats don't trust it. Even a lot of Republicans said that they wouldn't trust it in a poll because they know their guy. So,
I mean, the other example is the Kavanaugh hearings. I don't think. I mean, maybe they worked in the immediate midterms, but overall, I don't think they won that, or that was.
No. I don't think the Kavanaugh hearings had an impact in the way that they supposedly did in 2018. Obviously, they didn't. But,
I just don't think persuasion is really on the table in a substantial way here. And also the impact of persuasion has been overstated, as we all agree, in elections in general.
It's not persuasion, though. Like, the Supreme Court stuff is more base turnout than persuading, like, undecideds.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's not going to cause people to swing from one way to the other.
But I'm suggesting if they shut down the government for, I don't know, 6 weeks. I'm not sure when the continuing resolution has to be passed by. But let's say they shut down the government for 4 weeks. There is no funding, I don't know, for somehow they argue there's no funding for elections, or there's no funding for, for the vaccine, no funding for testing, no funding. And the Democrats.
A spike in that time period, too.
And there's a spike in that time period. I mean, I don't think it's crazy to say that could impact the election.
Yeah,
right?
I know. I just feel like they need to throw everything they've got at this. You have convinced me that the courts matter, Sam.
Listen, I know it's just that on some level, unfortunately, the ship had sailed. And now as it's like, as we stopped seeing the mast in the, in the horizon, people are going like, hey, wait a second, where are you going? Like, it's like the time to grab the ship was as it was like leaving the dock.
If only I had realized that the courts mattered sooner. No, I mean, I've always understood that the courts matter for these really short-term things. At the same time, I do think that the court needs to be delegitimized in the eyes of the people because it is a system that is 200 years out of date. And I mean, I guess it's good news and bad news, right? Because like the accelerationist argument doesn't really hold any water. The court's being delegitimized no matter what any of us do.
I agree with that. So wait, now, was that clip number 3 or 4?
That was 3.
I mean, 4, she's just saying that there is, let's hear Nancy Pelosi explain a little bit more. I mean, I think like I say, I think there is an argument that shutting down the government is a riskier strategy than one would imagine, because I do think that there's an opportunity to make the Democrats responsible for our, coronavirus thing. I mean, on balance, I probably would still go for use the continuing resolution. But here's Nancy Pelosi suggesting there are other arrows in her quiver, but she's not going to tell you what they are, which...
No guarantee that the White House and Senate Republicans won't try to push through a Supreme Court nomination in a lame duck session, even if Joe Biden wins on November 3rd, even if Democrats pick up seats in the House and maybe even the Senate. So what can you do then? Some have mentioned the possibility, if they try to push through a nominee in a lame duck session, that you and the House could move to impeach President Trump or Attorney General Barr as a way of stalling and preventing the Senate from acting on this nomination.
Well, we have our options. We have arrows in our quiver that I'm not about to discuss right now. But the fact is, we have a big challenge in our country. This president has threatened to not even accept the results of the election with statements that he and his henchmen have made. So right now, our main goal, and I think Ruth Bader Ginsburg would want that to be, would be to protect the integrity of the election as we protect the American people from the coronavirus. And I have faith in the American people on this Sunday morning. I hope and pray we have a vaccine and that it will be soon, but it must be safe and efficacious when we do, not one day sooner, not one day later than that. But the fact is, this administration has been a total failure in protecting.
All right. We don't know. This is all. The rest of it is just chum. But I think I would not be surprised if Biden wins that they would start impeachment hearings, because you're about as far away from the political implications. I think the political implications are not there anyways, but they're very, very, very timid in that respect. Here is Joe Biden on Saturday making an appeal to the Republican senators that, gosh, I'm trying to look at like the bright side on some of this stuff, and I will tell you about it after you watch this Joe Biden appeal.
Oh, man.
It does vote. Winning that vote, if it happens, is everything. Action and reaction, anger and more anger, sorrow and frustration at the way things are in this country now politically. That's the cycle that Republican senators will continue to perpetuate if they go down this dangerous path that they put us on. We need to de-escalate, not escalate. So I appeal to those few Senate Republicans, the handful who really will decide what happens. Please follow your conscience. Don't vote to confirm anyone nominated under the circumstances President Trump and Senator McConnell have created. Don't go there. Uphold your constitutional duty, your conscience. Let the people speak. cool the flames that have been engulfing our country. We can't keep rewriting history, scrambling norms, ignoring our cherished system of checks and balances. That includes this whole business of releasing a list of potential nominees that I would put forward. And now saying, after Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away, they said Biden should release his list. It's no wonder the Trump campaign asked that I release the list only after she passed away. It's a game for them. It's a play to gin up emotions and anger.
Come with me, and you'll be in a world of pure imagination.
The idea that Joe Biden still believes this is one of the most disturbing, because I think he's sincere. I think it's one of the most disturbing things that I can imagine. And so when I think of like, is there any silver lining here? Yes. And that is when they have this vote, maybe Joe Biden realizes like, hey, maybe this spell isn't broken. Maybe I can't work with these guys.
Yeah, and maybe the voters and the people realize that Biden is a dumbass and the things he says are ridiculous.
Well, I hope that doesn't happen because I want him to win as president. But afterwards, after he wins the election, that's fine. And then the idea that in this instance, you know, the pressure is going to be enormous to pack the court, which means like, you know, because I'm like seeing people out there who are like, well, maybe if they hold off the seat and they give it to Biden and Biden will put in a moderate. Look, the fact of the matter is that there is still a seat that is occupied by Gorsuch, which is a stolen seat. It is a stolen seat. And there is nothing in the Constitution about the size of the court. It's a law that was passed in the 1800s, I think it was. We've had Supreme Courts that were like the 6 members. I think we've had Supreme Courts that were 7 members. I think we've had Supreme Courts that were 10 members at some times. This is a statute. And the norms are off. That's off the table. They have already indicated that. Packing the court is the only way. And here's the thing. If you're going to pack the court, you pack it in such a way that they can't come back. Because if you go, you know, going down this road with the Republicans, they will strike back. Democrats, they're throwing around the idea, you know, Chris Coons, as of like a year ago, was saying like, if we get it back, we should really reinsert the filibuster. I mean, like the naivete and or just the intense desire to not have the accountability to allow the Republicans to thwart things so that you don't have to essentially show that you're interested in thwarting certain things. That is incredibly intense. So the silver lining here is that maybe it'll make it impossible. If Joe Biden is sincere, then it will maybe the scales will drop from his eyes. If he's insincere, it will make it impossible for him to maintain that posture going forward. Those are the only upsides.
I read about an interesting strategy from Matt Iglesias. It's called 1 billion Supreme Court justices.
There you go.
That's an even number, though. So it'd have to be 1 billion and 1 or
that's
1 billion and 3.
Thank you.
Yeah, well,
yeah,
it was a review copy.
Iglesias wrong again.
Well, I think we were discounting Biden a little bit too early here because it appears that after giving the speech, he has deployed a secret weapon to make it happen, to appeal to those GOP's senators.
I'm going to be working this week to reach across the aisle and see if I can't persuade some friends to respect tradition, to respect the precedent they set in 2016, and to let the voters decide.
Persuasion, Jamie.
Oh, my bad.
I mean, boy.
6 more years.
Boy, can I frame that? Is there a way to make that 2-dimensional and static on a piece of paper, like capture all of that in a single moment? Have we developed the technology yet for that? I don't want a snapshot of that. I want the entire moment, but something that I can hang on the wall.
I feel like we have something like that.
I feel like the Elon Musk neural implant.
Yes.
Your brain.
There it is. Chris Coons is desperate. He is going to be the fulcrum. I told you guys this a long time ago. Chris Coons is just setting himself up to be the gang of 6, the gang of 8, whatever it is. God. Meanwhile, Joe Biden utters one populist platitude. I mean, honestly, like really, it's a platitude. I would rather the platitude than not, but it's just a platitude, right? I mean, Joe Biden is represented, we used to call him the senator from MBNA. I mean, this guy is his career is so heavily invested in the banking industry that it is stunning. But he makes one platitude and then it's just like, forget it. This is MSNBC, the left, presumably left-leaning network. Now, granted, it's dayside, but here is Stephanie Ruhle after Joe Biden said the unthinkable.
Michael, Joe Biden said yesterday that his campaign is Scranton versus Park Avenue. Why is he going with this divide and conquer approach? That's Trump's thing. What about a message for all Americans? I don't live on Park Avenue, but I live pretty close to it. And you know how I got there?
Damn it.
Working my butt off. He doesn't want my vote?
Well, okay. There's so much here to unpack. I think he was being metaphorical, which I only raised because she said, like, I don't live on Park Avenue, but I live close. Now, maybe she's speaking metaphorically as well.
What is your address exactly, Stephanie?
But there's no OPSEC there, right? No operational security. But one of the first off, like, where does Donald Trump? Where's Donald Trump doing? What does he do? Donald Trump is not doing this. The idea that you can run an election where you're not creating any divides between people is absurd. The reason why you have an election in a country where the Republican president the Republican serving as president in 2 out of 3 elections lost the popular vote, just squeaked by with the electoral vote under dubious circumstances, is because this country is very, very, very split along many, many lines. What Donald Trump does is scapegoat people who are not white. That's very different from saying that my campaign is focused on small cities and Main Street as opposed to Park Avenue wealthy elite. It's not the same as Donald Trump. I mean, I think everyone who is not a child understands that. He was obviously also talking metaphorically. I mean, because there's Park Avenues in every city. And I don't think he was talking about Park Avenue, let's say, in Worcester. Scranton versus Park Avenue or in Worcester, Massachusetts.
No, I think he was talking about Park Avenue in downtown Hartford.
I mean, I presume he's talking about, it's about working class people, blue collar people, middle class people versus people who can afford multi-million dollar residences. I mean, I would imagine that's what it's about there.
I think Ruhle understands it as that way too, actually. She's just like, what, you're going to turn your back on us?
Exactly. I mean, it's pretty stunning. I mean, just even like, I can give you one reason why you would do that, because there's a lot more of the people in the Scranton bucket than in the Park Ave bucket. But it's also just sort of shocking. Like, does she really believe that he believes that?
Yeah, what's
Yeah.
her deal?
She can't.
Isn't she a wealthy liberal? Like, she should like Joe Biden.
Yeah, I think she's wealthy. Yes, I saw.
That's just like a weird like counter marketing, like counter brand marketing of herself, right? That she's like, I'm a hardworking lady who used to be a hedge fund sales manager, and now I'm a journalist.
Hey, those are long hours.
I mean, I don't even know. Like, there's so much that is invested in that. Like, I imagine she's sincere, but it's also sort of like, really? I don't know. I just seems so narrowly tailored. Why is Joe Biden attacking me?
Well, maybe Bernie Sanders has poisoned populist language for them to the point where even if they know it's a platitude coming from Joe Biden, it's just so triggering they can't help it.
They're very concerned about it getting out of control.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 989 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello, Sam. My name is Matthew Riley.
Matthew, welcome to the program. Where are you calling from?
Oh, I'm calling from Michigan, up north. Little inlet here on Lake Huron.
Okay.
And,
what's on your mind?
Well, I was just thinking to myself that these are the sorts of times where I have to constantly remind myself that anger is a secondary emotion, right? Like, so why, pardon me, why am I angry? Is it because I am hurt or I'm sad or I feel threatened or et cetera,
I see what you're saying. Yes.
Yeah, you know what I mean? I think it's important to remember that in times like these.
Fair enough.
So, but, So I play with a trio of guys. We make music usually on Saturday afternoons. And a couple months ago, I finally realized that we're probably going to have a civil war at the end of the year. And
in your band?
So we play. No, I wish.
Okay.
So we do about 45 minutes of music, and then we take a smoke break, and then we do another 45, and then we, et cetera. We usually play for a few hours. So on one of the smoke breaks, I was out there at my friend's house and explaining to him why I think we're going to have a civil war. And then I hadn't talked to my friend for a couple weeks. And then after Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, I texted him and I was like, yeah, I think my prediction just shot up a whole lot in expected reality. It's not really afraid. I just made it up.
Right.
But Sam, I think it just raises the stakes so much more. And dude, how amazing would it be if the Democratic Party had leadership that had any effing balls ever, dude, just like any balls. Just any ball.
Yeah. I mean, yes, listen, so much of this though is predictable. I mean, it is, it would be great, but it's going to take more than us just wishing that they're going to do stuff, right? Like we need to box them in search. We need to replace them. We need to do, there's a whole myriad of things that we need to do before it's just not happening. You can't just hope that they have, X, Y, or Z. And so, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I don't know in this instance, I'm not 100% sure, honestly, what I would recommend them do in this moment. Like I say, shutting down the government, I think is a risky strategy, particularly in the middle of a pandemic, particularly for the sake of a Supreme Court seat where even the left in and of itself doesn't really appreciate the relevance of it, broadly speaking. Right? I mean, so I don't know. But yes, I agree with you. It would be great. But, there's a lot of work that we need to do.
What else can I do? Sam, all I can do is call you and just bitch about shit. That's all I can do.
Well,
that's all I can do.
I don't know. Michigan's a pretty important state.
Sorry?
Michigan's a pretty important state.
Yes, it is.
11,000 votes.
Yeah, man. That's
Hey,
man.
Sorry.
Call.
I was gonna ask what kind of music your band plays.
Oh, hey, yeah, we're playing. So it's basically the brainchild of the dude who I texted, and he does like synths and drum machines and stuff. And then we've got the other guy who plays. It's called an Iwi, and it's like a synthetic clarinet. So it's like a synthesizer, but it's a clarinet. It looks like a clarinet or a sax or whatever.
I was looking for like maybe one or two words of the name of a genre.
You have a genre of music that you play?
No, I don't. I'm very anti-genre.
Right.
And, that's just the way I feel about things. I just, genres are for suckers.
I hear that, Matt. I appreciate the call.
I'm gonna say it's a jam band.
Sounds like a jam band. Calling from 702 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 702.
Hey, Sam, can you hear me?
Yeah. Who's this?
It's Bro Flamingo from Las Vegas.
Bro Flamingo from Las Vegas. How are you? What's on your mind?
Hey, Sam. It was a pretty good interview.
Thank you.
A couple of things on my mind. Also, by the way, the one with Stuart Stevens was really, really good. I really appreciate that one. That was a gem. The guy on the guest you had on today.
Yep.
One thing I disagree with him with, kind of, sort of. I see this on the left a lot. I want punishment. I want punishment of the police. I want punishment of people who are involved like racial crimes, like Rick Snyder and Flint. Yes, Flint got $600 million in reparations, or I guess restitution, whatever it was. Good start. But I want punishment on the table. Because when you punish these guys, it shows you have skin in the game. As a matter of fact, they'd rather give you money than get punished. And that kind of dovetail within Barack Obama. When Barack Obama came in, well, no, we got to turn the page on torture. Very timid. No, there's got to be punishment on the table. I really feel that's important, especially it shows that you have skin in the game with the left, galvanized. These guys have been getting off way too much. Corrupt cops and everything, the racist dead end, they got to be punished. The militias and everything, investigations. Then maybe we'll talk about, the love of God and Jesus. Nah, there's got to be punishment on the table. And the second thing I want to talk about is, this thing with Ruth Bader Ginsburg and her going away, Sam, it's really bad. But I feel like, again, the left is not playing to win. And, I moderate a group online. I'm not going to say which one. DSA affiliated, whatever. And I see a lot of dumb left talking points just running around. It's like, oh, my God, man, no wonder we're getting screwed. It's really, really disheartening.
I mean,
people like, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was holding off on this, but I'll play it. We have a clip of Jimmy Dore then and now, actually. And I appreciate the call, Bro Flamingo. And I think, one of the problems is that some basic knowledge of how this stuff works makes it very difficult to make a calculation as to what positions we should have and what we should be pushing our politicians to do. Appreciate the call. Let's play this clip. Here is, I don't know which one to play first. Should we play the one in response? Let's play the most recent one, and then we will go back in time. This is what's so dumb about now look, I don't know how many left people listen to Jimmy Dore anymore. I don't know. You go into his comments, apparently it's a lot of right-wingers. But here is Jimmy Dore, just still, and what's amazing to me about this is that we had a conversation, the last conversation we had was 4 years ago, and he displayed such an enormous ignorance as to some of the most basic functioning of our government, like the way that judges are picked and stuff like this, and a complete disdain for the idea that judges were relevant. I mean, the original clip that Jimmy Dore and I ended up having a little argument about was one where he and his his co-hosts were saying, like, it's okay if Peter Thiel becomes a Supreme Court justice. Who cares? We'll get over this stuff. It's not relevant. They can just filibuster. But let's go to what Jimmy Dore's saying today, or at least in the wake of Ginsburg dying, because Jimmy Dore thought this was an impossibility. And he completely poo-pooed the idea that any of this stuff is relevant whatsoever in 2016. And I'm just using him as a surrogate for other people who have these ideas. And because he's such a perfect example of it. He poo-pooed the idea of the judiciary at all in 2016. So it's interesting to see his reaction now.
Ginsburg, U.S. Supreme Court judge, dies of cancer at age 87. I thought she was older than that. The Senate just confirmed 3 more of Trump's federal judges. These judges will be with us for the rest of our lives. The only Democrat senators to vote no on all 3 were Senator Markey, Senator Blumenthal, Senator Gillibrand, and Senator Warren. So the Democrats are approving Trump's judges left and right. Here are the Senate Democrats who voted in Trump's latest federal judge. Even during the election year, Democrats can't even fake being in opposition to Trump. Wall Street approved deregulators are voted in by Republicans and Democrats because they serve the same big money interests. So here are the senators who voted in Trump's latest federal judges. See all the Democrats? In contrast, Republicans blocked every single appointee from Barack Obama in 2015 to 2016, saying the next president should choose the bench.
God.
The Democratic Senate Campaign Committee still fundraises off being the resistance. They're the resistance. Chuck Schumer and Democrats' legacy will be allowing Trump to completely transform the courts for generations.
Okay, pause it for 1 second. Now, who here can tell what the difference is between those years during Obama and these years during Trump? Is there anybody who knows the difference between the majority party and the non-majority party? Does anybody here know the difference between filibusters that can function for federal judges and filibusters that can't? The Democrats, towards the end there of Obama's reign, when he was president, Harry Reid finally was able to get enough votes to get rid of the filibuster on judicial appointments. That filibuster is gone. Does not matter how a single one of those Democrats voted. Not a single one of them. Doesn't make a difference. They vote maybe because they vote because they want them to deregulate. Maybe they vote because they want to show that in a vote that it doesn't make a difference, that they're practicing Senate comity. They vote because they feel that judges who are qualified and the president has won the election and the Senate, they should get passed. I don't know why they vote, but their votes are irrelevant because they cannot stop any of these judges. They can't stop a single one of them. Now, has Chuck Schumer been horrible in this regard? Could he have gummed up the works and slowed things down? Without a doubt. I've pointed that out a myriad of times where he okays a whole host of judges, where he makes a deal because everybody wants to go on vacation and they're just going to do it by unanimous consent. There's no doubt. Could they have been more obstructions? Could they have kept Donald Trump from installing 200 federal judges and instead made it the number 150? Maybe 160, maybe 170. Maybe they definitely could have done better. But 4 years ago, even the Supreme Court was irrelevant to Jimmy Dore. Is there any more of this clip? I don't know where he's reading from, but there's obviously a huge difference between being in the majority and getting rid of the and having a filibuster, and then getting rid of the filibuster, and then being in the minority.
Without a fight. Why? Because those judges are approved by Wall Street. Which means both parties approve them. Federal judges
also, this is also just like an incredible amount of stupidity. Wall Street cases don't come up for all of these different circuits. They can have pro-business rulings, it's true, but not Wall Street. But that's okay. Continue.
Lifetime appointment. Why did the Democrats agree with the Republicans on those lifetime federal judge appointments? Because they were told to by Wall Street. And why are those judges there? They're there to deregulate Wall Street. What are those Democrats there for? They're there to deregulate Wall Street. And why didn't MSNBC make a bigger deal out of that? That the Democrats are approving all of Trump's judges.
Because they're also pro-corporate.
It's weird that MSNBC doesn't make a big deal out of that.
Wait, pause it. I mean, look, MSNBC is owned by Comcast. It used to be owned by the largest and a minority share is the largest weapons dealer in the country. If you, as this radical anti-establishment leftist with very little left critique, as far as I can tell, in 2016 say, who cares about judges? That's ridiculous. Aren't going to say anything about it. You think a company, a broadcast unit owned by a major corporation that is contingent upon on ratings is going to bring up the judicial appointments, circuit court judges? I mean, is this the first time that Jimmy Dore's even talked about this? This has been going on for 4 years.
You expect Chuck Schumer to lead a valiant opposition? Thanks
well, it's
for
just
that.
like, my point is like, who cares what MSNBC is saying? like honestly, like you haven't been talking about it either. There's no doubt in my mind that Jimmy Dore hasn't even contemplated the idea of how many judges have gone through. There's no doubt in my mind that Jimmy Dore doesn't know the first thing about any of this stuff he's talking about. He just found an article that he could somehow like shove into like, this is about MSNBC. Yeah, MSNBC, of course. It is owned by Comcast. Continue.
You know why they don't? Because the Supreme Court is fulfilling every MSNBC's corporate owner's wishes. So if you watch MSNBC for news because you're a chump, fantastic. You get entertained while the rest of the country gets raped. Now I'll go back to writing Simpsons episodes.
What?
Is that a shout out?
Simpsons episodes?
Did you write a Simpsons episode?
No, I didn't. That wasn't a shot at me, I don't think. But let's talk about, let's go back, because you should not be watching MSNBC if you want to know about the importance of the courts, because they're not going to tell you. Let's go all the way back to 2016 when I had Jimmy Dore on and was talking about, you don't think Mitch McConnell's going to get rid of the filibuster? You expect the Democrats who are out of power in the Senate to stop the appointments of Supreme Court justices. This is where Jimmy was telling me, who cares about the courts?
Well, I think I just kind of showed you how you're wrong about all this stuff, and you're voting out of fear again. Out of fear. Oh, because there might be 2 Supreme Court judges. What if there's 3? What if the moon falls into Lake Michigan? What are we going to do then?
Now, Jimmy, let's talk about risk assessment. Do you think there's a difference in the probability that through 2 80-year-olds with multiple cases of cancer are going to serve out their term versus the moon falling into Lake Michigan?
I just disagree with your forecast.
Well, look out Lake Michigan.
Yeah. What is the status of Lake Michigan right now? Because if you're anywhere in that vicinity, I'd be watching out. Yeah. I would be looking up.
We should get Matt back on the line. Maybe he can check on it for us.
Here's the thing. The ignorance on the left, and somehow it's MSNBC's fault. Yes, MSNBC is corporate, and they're happy. I would imagine in some instances, I would imagine I don't know who MSNBC is, but the corporate owners of MSNBC, I would imagine, are not too worried about the Supreme Court. Now, of course, if you watch any of the primetime thing, everybody's on there talking about how this is problematic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The Supreme Court, the reality is that almost every single replacement or person who has been sat on the Supreme Court has moved the court to the right over the past 40 or 50 years. I think Sotomayor may have replaced a Republican, so that may have changed in that respect. But broadly speaking, the problem is that you get idiots like Jimmy who are supposedly on the left who think that the courts are irrelevant, I guess, except to say that your favorite cable TV program is not good. The point is that this was completely predictable. Completely predictable. And it's done. I don't know if there's really anything that can be done to stop it. There's a little bit maybe that can slow it, but this was predictable. And I don't know. People make that type of huge ignorant mistake and then don't even bother to hey, maybe I should bone up on this stuff a little bit. I don't know. It's ridiculous.
They can still blame it on the Democrats.
Exactly. We have no agency as people. I get the fact that the Democrats have a responsibility to earn people's votes, but also if you should also know the consequences of your actions, particularly if you want to get up and speak to, I don't know, he's got a very big audience.
Well, he had a posture he needed to maintain, which is that there was no difference between the parties, and his Supreme Court analysis flowed from that. That happens a lot, I think.
That's what's so incoherent about everything he says now. If it doesn't mean anything, if there's no difference in the parties, then what's the point? What do you expect? Why are you even talking about the Supreme Court? What difference does it make? It doesn't make any difference. You've already said it's irrelevant. What difference does it make if you don't think the courts are important that Chuck Schumer fails to fight Republican appointees? Because you've already said the court's irrelevant. You're out of that conversation. You're irrelevant. You're just up there performing. It's just a little performance. What does he call himself? A jack-off comedian? That's what a jack-off comedian looks like. It is. It's completely masturbatory. It really is.
Yeah.
That's actually probably the most accurate thing that he's ever probably said.
Well, if he were coming at it from some sort of principled left communist, well-argued position, I might respect it more, as I do people who hold principled left communist views, but I do not believe that is what is going on here.
No, I don't think so either. I think it's really just
I think he's far from a communist, actually.
A mental issue. Calling from a 705 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 704.
Oh, hey, that would be me. It's John calling from North Carolina.
John from North Carolina. What's on your mind?
Oh, man, well, plenty in North Carolina, but I think the main thing I was going to mention was I got a call about a week ago from Tom Tillis. Just one of those robocalls inviting me to join in a town hall. And I work from home now. So I turned it on and I listened to the entire thing. I tried to get through to ask a question, but no luck. But it was just funny to hear, caller after caller. The very first guy says, why are we even calling this a pandemic? It doesn't meet some certain threshold to be a pandemic. Then you have people who are saying, we're doing more harm by the closures and everything are doing more harm than the virus itself. And to each one of them, he had, the most cowardly reply that was like, I agree with you. I agree with you. We need to open up and do it in a way that's safe. And I'm like, no, Tom, that's not what they're saying. You aren't agreeing with them. You're saying you agree with them. But these are people who are still hoaxifying this, denying the existence of it. And then you're turning around and saying, we have to be safe. And I wanted to get through so bad and ask, what changes do you suggest?
Right. What
do
constitutes safe? What can we do that is safe under
what's
these
the real
circumstances?
action?
Right.
Right. Yeah. Do we bust schools wide open immediately? Do we allow, every business to open to full capacity? Like what do you mean? And so I just thought he's a good talker. It wasn't hyper obvious that he was dodging, everything that they were saying. He did a good job. And I did want to congratulate him on that too. But, just so cowardly, and he's not going to call these people out for any of this, of course, because he needs all of it.
Right. Of course. And I mean, they're locked in. There's not a lot of wiggle room for these guys. They're going to hopefully go down with the ship, but we'll see. Appreciate the call.
Thanks.
Calling from an 814 area code. Who's this? Where you calling from?
Hi, this is Luke. I'm calling from just outside Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Luke from outside Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. What's on your mind?
Well, I want to start saying I'm an exuberant leftist, and I've been listening to the show for a few years.
It's a new merch idea right there.
I'm a refugee from the dumb left, which lost me around the last presidential election. So I was getting flashbacks from the Jimmy Dore direct we were playing earlier. Not great.
I imagine.
But anyway.
Well, what was your thinking at that time? I'm curious. Like, I mean, I don't mean to pick on you, but we got you here. What was your thinking? I mean, like, was it just?
My politics said I had started like watching some TYT, and so I think Jimmy Dore might have been a part of them when I started with TYT, and so I sort of followed over to his channel, and then, but it was very intellectually incoherent. So I eventually was able to, pull the chute. And then I sort of thrashed around looking for other leftist content, and I eventually landed on you guys and Michael's, God rest his soul, Michael Brooks show. And I think I'm a little reformed now. But I can't really speak to what exactly I was thinking. I guess I wasn't exactly. But anyway, I'm calling today because I've been working for the 2020 census the past few months. I'm happy to take a shofar for that if one's on the table. But I wanted to share a little bit of my experiences and my perceptions of the issues of the management and the infrastructure from the Commerce Department regarding the census.
Okay, let's hear it.
If you have some time. So,
I just gave you a shofar, but I have a feeling the shofar, you can't hear it. Did you hear that shofar?
I did not, but I take your word.
Okay,
it seems to strike me as pretty honorable.
Right.
The first red flag for me was on my training day when 25% of the people who were expected failed to attend. That's granted, there was only 4 people expected that day, but still sort of a harbinger of things to come. So jumping ahead a couple months, I've had 4 different field supervisors. 2 of them have changed without warning, or like any sort of reason that I could see. And that seems like kind of a red flag for any workplace, especially one with a sort of Damocles deadline and the future of the country on spec. But so the frenetic sort of scare quotes leadership has led to a lot of confusion among enumerators like me. For example, we were asked to complete at least 0.75 cases per hour in order to stay eligible for bonus pay. It was later dropped to 0.5 cases per hour, but both my first 2 managers either misread the email or lacked any understanding of the decimal system. One thinking it meant we needed 75 cases per hour, or another that we needed to complete 75% of our assigned cases for the day in an hour. And they passed this information to their employees, and who all had the details of the bonus pay structure. So hopefully they weren't all taken in with that.
Only the best people.
I did, however, see some version of that reported on MSNBC claiming the census was asking folks to do 90 cases an hour, which I think I have to assume is a misinterpretation of that policy.
Just to be clear, if my math is correct, that would mean that you need to do 1.5 cases a minute.
Yeah. I mean, I can't believe, I don't know how the producers let that get into the read, but they did.
Right.
There you go. Anyway, I want to talk a little bit about the app we use in enumerating households. The map that's built in is next to worthless. You can usually glean sort of the correct block of the target house or, the right side of the river often. But beyond that, it more or less doesn't have any function. And another sort of bigger issue from my perspective is that if someone on the street stops us and says, hey, they haven't completed the census, they want to complete the census, there's no ability for us to complete their interview. We're limited to the cases we're assigned. So strictly limited that it seems like it was almost designed to ensure an undercount.
Right.
There are other procedural issues with the app, but it's alarming because it really does seem optimized to prevent a full and complete census. And last, I wanted to say the reason I was able to call in today is because the census computers that assign our workload told me there wasn't enough work this morning. So,
oh my God,
I know that can't be true. I left almost 60 cases uncompleted yesterday out of my batch of like 95 I had. And even if they divided those between two enumerators, it's unlikely they could be completed today. So,
wow,
we're bound by the Census Department's algorithm. As I said, it feels like it might be designed to fail.
I think at one point, there's going to have to be a contemplation. I mean, the Constitution requires a census every 10 years. It's unclear to me that if you couldn't statutorily augment that, the next year.
I think it's likely something has to be done, but we are falling short, I'm sad to report.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, it seems to me that you could also make the argument that because of the coronavirus, we were incapable of counting in the way that we would normally do it. And that at least there is a sort of a technical reason why you would just do a redo. Frankly, we would probably need to hire people anyways in 2021. So I'm down with it.
Well, from your lips to God's ears, as I say. I'll take the rest of the conversation off call. But it's great to be on. My sincere pleasure to listen to all of you, and look forward to many more years of exuberant leftism from you guys.
Appreciate the call.
I don't know.
Leftists to the front is what I say.
Yeah, I don't know how exuberant I'm feeling these days, so I'm glad somebody has it.
Yeah, I was going to say the feeling of when I heard the news on Friday, it wasn't exuberance I felt. I remembered the moment Scalia died and how exuberant I felt at that moment. That was exuberance. This
conversation is literally making Sam sleepier.
I honestly, I'm reacting I didn't sleep. The fact is I did not sleep any night over the weekend. Like I slept, I think 45 minutes a night, just 2 episodes. Here is AOC. I think she was on Instagram. And, we talk about the dumb left. We got let me go with this first. Here's an IM, Rob from Austin. In 2016, I voted green because I, in parens, wrongly thought they would get funding if they reached 5%. That, I think, is actually not an irrational reason to vote. Because at least you're thinking, if I do this, then that might happen. That, to me, has like some rationality to it. And then you got to weigh, is it worth it in this, depending on what state you're in. But I was in a red state. Okay, there you go. And couldn't stand Hillary's hawkishness in ignoring domestic progressive issues such as Standing Rock. fair enough. If you vote for her, the Democrat in that state anyways, it's not going to make a difference. I don't like her. I want the Greens to get 5%. You vote that way. Not a stupid calculation. Now I'd crawl through broken glass to vote for Biden because he's not nearly as bad as Hillary, and we desperately need a more competent and less evil executive branch. The only thing I could say is that reaction also totally predictable. Quite sure that I made that prediction either during that same conversation with Jimmy Dore in 2016 or throughout that summer. I actually think that Clinton was probably in some respects to the left of Biden. There were other problems, but I'm not convinced that Biden is to the left of Clinton. You could say that Biden comes in with a lot less of a machine and an apparatus. And so maybe, his positions are a little bit less founded in something that is, rock solid, and he'd be able to change him in some way. Nevertheless, I mean, who knows that calculation? But here is AOC talking about the importance of going out to vote. And this is why she's, I think, such an exceptional politician.
Thing you need to do is vote. And I want to talk to some of my brothers and sisters and some of my brethren that don't vote. And they don't vote not out of apathy, but actually because they feel so heartbroken at our democracy. Because I understand why people say, I don't vote, what's the point? I really empathize with it. I'm not here to dismiss you. I'm not here to poo-poo you. I'm not here to say you're wrong or that you're a bad person. What I'm here to say is that this year, this election, voting for Joe Biden is not about whether you agree with him. It's a vote to let our democracy live another day. That's what this is about. We need to act in solidarity and protection for the most vulnerable people in our society who have already experienced the violent repercussions of this administration. And the reason
And of course, I mean, she's correct there. Now, I, on the other hand, am here to poo-poo you and to do all those things because, frankly, her audience is much bigger than ours. And there are people who are interested in her but are generally not interested in politics. That probably follow her on Instagram and maybe have never voted before. When I crap on people, it's because you don't listen to this program if you've never voted before.
I don't know.
I don't think there are people. I think there are people who, let me put it this way. There are people on this program who don't vote, but are far more involved in politics than the people she's speaking to. And to the extent that I poo-poo those people, it's really the people who I think are out there spreading willfully spreading the disinformation, that are doing it out of some resent and some issue they have with, personal issues or whatever it is. Honestly, the YouTubers who basically say completely disempower yourself and ignore the mechanisms of the way our government work to justify disempowering yourselves.
Well, it's funny when they occasionally do videos on the squad too, as if they're part of that project and haven't been just where's the green squad, I guess would be my question.
What do you mean?
Like when Jimmy Dore,
yeah.
Right?
Okay.
If they try to ride the squad's popular coattails, well, it's like that they're Democrats.
Yes, and they have specifically made the conscious decision that it is going to be far more effective to go in and use the existing apparatus as a way of making change than to recreate something in a system that is completely tilted against the creation of a new apparatus, and particularly when it's filled with a bunch of incompetence. But I mean, her last point remains. It's one that we made in 2016. There are people who are going to suffer material consequences. And unless you can articulate, like, when someone writes in and says, like, I lived in a red state, so I voted for the Greens so that they would get 5%, so they would get some matching funds and they would get on the ballot. That at least is like, that's a plan. There's some thought that has gone into that, right? And you're saying, like, my vote for the candidate who could win is not going to make a difference in this context because of where I live. And so I'm going to use my vote to some other ends. It may work out, it may not, but at least I have a strategy. I have a plan here. But when you've got such evidence of people who are suffering because of this administration, talk to an immigration lawyer. I know how bad Obama was. Talk to an immigration lawyer if you want to talk about what the difference is. Look at the EPA, the FDA. Look at the coronavirus. I mean, the examples go on and on and on and on of the material impact that the difference between a Donald Trump and a Hillary Clinton or a Donald Trump and a Joe Biden is dramatic. It's dramatic, the material impact. And unless you've got some like thought out strategy of how another term of Donald Trump is going to help, then you're just an idiot. Or worse, you're a bad person. And while you're divining your plan on how Donald Trump winning is going to help these people that we were talking about, or broadly society, I would go back to the example of the last time that this happened, or go back to, I don't know, George Bush or Ronald Reagan and see what comes out of that. Getting a Joe Biden was completely predictable because, like that someone wrote, like, I would walk through glass to vote for him now. Why? Because this is what happens when people see how bad it can get. They go for the safe harbor. Whether Joe Biden is the way that people should have assessed it as being the safe harbor is, I think I would argue that he wasn't. But that's what his sales pitch was. And that's why it was so effective. People want a safe harbor. Oddly enough, when you're out at sea and it's rough and this and that, you don't want to take more risks. The time that people take risks actually is when you've gotten some measure of stability. The best time to take a risk would have been, following like the idea of like Supreme Court's locked up for a generation or two.
We can find examples and counterexamples of that throughout history.
I think there are far more examples of revolution. I can tell you from the academic perspective. I mean, revolutions happen where there are small gains and people feel some semblance of security. And then they take that next step.
Can you give any examples of that? I'm going to turn it around.
Well, the Soviet Union, when they started to, in some ways, when there was some relaxation on things like when there was perestroika, I guess, you saw people get, as soon as they got more and more information, the whole thing started to crumble within months or years. That's the most recent one.
Because I understand some of the reforms. I'm not an expert, so don't yell at me. But I understand some of the reforms that happened in advance of the October Revolution, or all of the reforms really, were basically left the serfs out completely. So didn't really make an impact on their lives. but maybe they saw things getting better for other people.
I'm looking at society as a whole. When there is greater stability, and that doesn't necessarily impact everyone, but when there is a loosening within the context of, let's say, like a dictatorship or something like that, when people have a little bit more, I mean, look at the 50s and 60s in this country. I mean, when there is incremental benefits, where people feel security, where people weren't worried about, like, when they felt like they had some measure of security in the context of their jobs or whatever it was, you start to see people push for more.
We did not have a revolution in the 1960s, though.
Okay, well,
I mean, I would say Spain.
I don't think we're going to have a revolution. Frankly,
Spain in the 30s is an example of this. I mean, they were increasingly liberalizing forms of government, and then the Workers' Party's like, let's take this all the way. And then, the fascists from the colonies came back and had something to say about that. But I mean, Spain would be an example of increasing liberalization leading to a moment where you can try to have a revolution.
I'm just saying there are examples of this, and there are just as many counter examples. Like, in the time before the Cuban Revolution, people were living under a brutal dictatorship. And I don't think that there were very many reforms making things better. But I think regardless, our job is the same. So this is not an argument in favor of reforms. This is not an argument against reforms. I'm just saying the left,
about Batista, to be honest with you.
The anti-capitalist left, our job is going to be the same, and we can work from conditions of desperation, and we can fight from positions of relative strength.
I'm not convinced about in terms of Batista, because most of that theory that I recall reading was a function of Latin America. And so I'd have to go back to check on that. But I'm not convinced about that. That actually, in the context of the Cuban Revolution, that there wasn't some reforms that took place under Batista that didn't lead up to that. I will revisit that. But most of my understanding of those revolutions came from basically events in Latin America.
All right. I'm trying really hard to make comments of opinions I believe in that will also not get me yelled at. So
So, what are the examples of it getting a lot worse and that leading to a revolution? Like retrenchment, what are those examples?
I'm not saying that things getting worse necessarily leads to a revolution. I'm just saying revolutions can happen under conditions of utter oppression, and they can happen following some kind of reforms that mean something to people's lives.
But I guess the question is, we're not talking about, obviously, the desire for revolution is going to come from situations where there's oppression, right? But the point being, where are examples of things getting worse under a repressive system that lead to, where things become more repressive, that leads to a successful revolution?
Oh, yeah. I see where you're going with this. And I'm not saying that there are examples of things getting worse, but things just having been bad. And no, I'm not ever going to get
worse in a Trump second term. And I think they definitely got worse from a Obama to Trump.
I mean, bottom line, things are bad. Things have been bad for a long time for the vast majority of humanity. And yes, these small incremental differences are not nothing to the people that they will impact. But I think in the long term, it's one thing to fight over, are we going to have DACA? Are we not going to have DACA? Immigrants are in concentration camps, and they have been in concentration camps. And things are already incredibly, or Roe versus Wade, right? Will they overturn Roe versus Wade? abortion is already inaccessible to so many people. So like we can talk about the details, which do matter as well, but in the long term, we're going to have to do something a lot more drastic in order to make the changes we need to see for the people who've been suffering forever.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that there are, probably close to a half a dozen states right now where a woman's right to choose is effectively abridged. But it's likely that it's going to be closer to like 24 states where it is completely abridged. I mean, I think that's a material difference.
Yes, and it would certainly be a step in the wrong direction.
Individuals. I mean, DACA, the implications are like literally for millions of people. The TPS, which just went through, that court case failed. We're talking probably, hundreds of thousands of people who are implicated by this. I just, I don't know. I don't know.
I think frankly leftists needs to abolish trying to hold the posture that there's no difference and just acknowledge the difference and then move on to what's actually wrong with the Democrats in distinction to the Republicans.
Don't you think fighting Biden is a much more like worthwhile fight and ultimately one that can produce better outcomes than fighting Trump a second term?
It seems very possible. Yeah.
Okay. I agree.
Let's go to how this Supreme Court fight may play out in the context of Senate races. And we're going to get a sense in a couple of weeks. We're going to start to see it in the polls, see if it works. Here is Jon Ossoff. Not a candidate that should be exciting a lot of people on the left. But again, we're talking about Georgia. Although Warnock is a much more interesting candidate to me in Georgia, and Joe Lieberman's son may be splitting votes from him. And I can't tell you how much that, Anyways, here's Jon Ossoff using David Perdue, his opponent, senator from Georgia. There's two races in Georgia. You remember one is a special election against Kelly Loeffler. Using David Perdue to contrast David Perdue's position, 2016, 2020.
Senator from Georgia.
As a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, since day one, I have consistently said the Senate should not hold hearings or schedule a vote. The Senate should not hold hearings or schedule a vote on any Supreme Court nominee. No Supreme Court nominee should be considered for the Supreme Court until the American people choose our next president this November. Until the American people have chosen who they want to be their next president. The American people deserved a voice in this process. The responsible course of action here is to refrain from initiating the nomination process in the midst of a presidential election. I also believe that it shouldn't be taken up in lame duck. No consideration during the lame duck. You can't have it both ways. It's the principle, about the principle. It is about upholding the principle. This was my position before the election. This is still my position today. The hypocrisy of this situation, and yes, indeed, hypocrisy is exactly what makes everyone back in my home state absolutely mad.
Now, of course, Perdue in 2020 is going to support the nomination of a Supreme Court justice to fill Ginsburg's seat. And I think, in places like Georgia or South Carolina, I think that can be where you're like right on the cusp, right? 2 or 3%, where you don't have where, you start to, and here it is. Here's Perdue supports Trump's push for a Supreme Court vote this year. This is going to hurt candidates like that. I think someone like Jamie Harrison, I think someone like Ossoff, again, neither one of these guys are going to be voting in, broadly speaking, in ways that I want, but they're going to be caucusing with the Democrats and at least stopping the worst of what we get from the Republicans. And there'll be probably some good votes. I think this is going to resonate with a small sliver of the population in a place like South Carolina and Georgia. And that could very well make the difference. I mean, we're going to have a better sense, but these races are very tight in these states. And this type of thing, I think, particularly when you have a president who is disliked and you see these guys cutting against their own stated principles to follow the president, it helps with the narrative, I think.
Who do you think is going to care about Republican hypocrisy who didn't care before?
I think, low information voters who are in these states and don't know, just like judge who they're going to vote for. Like, seems like a good guy, stand-up guy. I think that voter.
People,
I think
might go for Ossoff.
Yeah, people who watch TV, basically, who aren't engaged in the political process that much. I was just in South Carolina, and the number of ads being run on the basis of being a hypocrite against Lindsey Graham and against Jamie Harrison, for that matter, are basically on every 40 seconds on every channel.
I think there's a significant number of people who vote based upon that guy seems like a good guy, that guy seems like not a good guy. And that's it.
Did you see the thing where Lindsey Graham challenged Jamie Harrison to release his tax returns and basically raising Jamie Harrison's name awareness, and then Jamie Harrison just released his tax returns and basically Lindsey Graham just gave him free name awareness with that campaign?
That's awesome. But yeah, I think there's voters to be had there, of course.
No.
I mean, do you have reason to believe that's not relevant? Portion, I don't know, 1 or 2 percentage points at least?
I don't know, man. The Republicans have been pretty huge hypocrites for a pretty long time, and nobody cares.
Republicans.
Democrats care, obviously, but people who vote for them don't care, and they can get away with saying whatever they want because most people vote on partisan lines.
Blatant. When have you seen forget the parties for a second, okay? Forget the party. When have you seen such a blatant reversal? I honestly, the fact that there was so much video on this is, I think, just problematic. It's not a Republican Democratic thing. I think that people are looking at. I think there's a significant percentage of people, I don't know how big it is. I don't think it's huge, but I think it's some who just literally don't have any idea about the parties. They're just looking at oh my God, that guy just completely said something absolutely opposite of what he just said yesterday. That's bad. And that's it. I don't even think they probably know the details of that, of even the issue. It's just literally I said one thing and then I said another. I can't trust that guy. I don't know anything else about it. That's it. Boom.
I will say, I think if Ossoff was inspiring actual left politician, that would probably help him more than that.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Yes. Without a doubt. A better politician would be good. I'm just saying that, does this event hurt? If I could trade Ossoff for being, super dynamic and, even being Stacey Abrams, let's say, and this thing in the absence of this, I would say Stacey Abrams is going to be a better candidate there.
The problem is, does it increase Dem turnout as much as the Supreme Court being on the ballot is going to increase Republican turnout?
Right.
I think the Supreme Court is going to increase turnout on both sides such that they cancel each other out. That is, if they don't manage to confirm justice before the time's up, and I think they will.
We'll see. I tend to think that the right generally, the Republicans generally get more hay out of it because they have a better understanding of the implications of the court.
I mean, Act Blue broke their like 1-day fundraising record, so that's like a pretty good marker for how it might represent turnout for Democratic voters.
But is it?
Also,
I'm skeptical of that because you like.
Depending on how they use the money, I suppose. I mean, it depends on how many people they raise that money off of as well.
Right. Right.
But I think this will be a good litmus test, possibly, if we can delineate the difference between voting because of a Supreme Court vacancy versus, like, you know, whether or not you care about hypocrisy. Is the distinction of, like, does Trump get a pass because he's not a politician as voters typically understand them versus the hypocrisy of a politician?
Right. I think that's true. I think that, you know, guys like Graham, who, you know, Graham's run for so long about principles and this and that, you know, it just cuts against this narrative.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to organize around the Supreme Court as we don't have anything on the left like the right has with the abortion and the Supreme Court. Like that single-mindedly trained so many people on to talk about the Supreme Court that don't really even follow politics that closely. And like, yeah, the left needs to figure out a way to.
Liberals talk about abortion in the courts all the time. That's like one of the primary things that the Democrats like to hang over our heads to threaten us with. We don't vote for their crappy candidates.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't. But
it doesn't motivate as many people as it does for the evangelicals. Well, 1/4 of the Republicans reported. Let me see if I even have the poll here. 1/4 of the Republicans in the last election voted because of the Supreme Court. That just does not happen on the left. You never see the Supreme Court as significant of a motivation to vote.
Like, I think maybe we need to reframe that body as not only threatening to, you know, women's bodily autonomy, but, you know, workers' rights and that sort of stuff. Because, I mean, that's the only way we're going to be able to mobilize people, I think.
Absolutely. I think that's true. And in Florida, the Republicans are saying that if Trump nominates Lagoa, that's a difference in Florida. I don't know if that's the case, but maybe.
I would be surprised if I wasn't thinking Biden was doing too well in Florida, so I'd be kind of like to hear that.
I don't know. I can't tell. The polling's all over the place in Florida. It feels like. Calling from a 509 area code. You are the final caller of the day.
Hey, cool. This is Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan. How are you, sir?
Really good. How are you doing?
Oh, great. Really great. Thank you.
I saw you got cucked big time by David Pakman.
Yeah.
$1 million.
Yeah, I did. Thank you. Thank you for the reminder. Appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah, I wasn't sure if that was factoring into your bad day yet, so I wanted to make sure we got it in there.
Appreciate that.
So I mean, I've been calling in for a long time about the immigration stuff and the differences. I wanted to highlight two other things real quick. One, Trump is using the language of eugenics, and he's a special kind of racist who is, in my opinion, compared to like George W. Bush or sort of traditional Republicans. And he's radicalizing, you know, otherwise normal people, including like young people. And I know it's not like cool to talk about how liberals are just mad at the way that he acts, but I do think that that's like a big deal. And if somebody like that is reelected, it sends a real message to, you know, kids online who are consuming, you know, just Ben Shapiro videos or, you know, that sort of thing. And I'm seeing that within my own family, these people who were sort of apolitical before, and all of a sudden they're, you know, kind of out of their minds. And I think that just, it's a very symbolic thing, and maybe it's smallish. It's down on the list of reasons to vote against him, but you know,
I don't know. Hold on for 1 second. Let me play this clip. Let me play this. Here's Donald Trump in Minnesota.
It's disgusting.
He's in, is it Bemidji? What is the name of the town?
Bemidji, yep.
Bemidji, Minnesota. Listen to this. Like, I mean, first of all, listen to it in two ways. Listen to it in terms of like, is this the country you want to live in? And then listen to it as if you're an immigrant in that community. And the fear that something like this, that the president of the United States, arguably the most powerful person, certainly in the country, but maybe in the world. Go ahead.
One of the most vital issues in this election is the subject of refugees. You know it. You know it perhaps better than almost anybody. Lots of luck. You having a good time with your refugees? That's good. We want to have Omar. Yeah, he said Omar. That's a beauty. How the hell did she win the election? How did she win?
There you go. You having fun with your refugees, and they crashed the TSP thing, right? He says that at one point he said that Biden will turn the state into a refugee camp. But go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, so I mean, I know that those people don't go away just because he loses an election. But like when the opportunity comes to repudiate that by way of an election, I think that we have a duty to do so. And then just another quick example. So I tweeted about this. So Governor Inslee in August announced he was appropriating $40 million to undocumented families in Washington state, which is great. But it was also like 5 months into the pandemic. And the story behind why he did that, it's not because he's like a Democrat and he woke up and like is thinking about cool things to do for immigrants, but he had a conference call with some activists, and he was sort of doing a symbolic, thanks for being great kind of conference call. And they asked him, like, why aren't you doing anything? And like they humiliated him sort of publicly. I think the video is available online somewhere. And he ended up like arranging another meeting with them, and it turned into like a whole thing. But and eventually, under the pressure of like these people who are dedicating their time and their effort to these sorts of things, he buckled and he granted this money. And so to me, like, electoral politics is about being disappointed maybe most of the time, but also just having people in office where you can get your foot in the door. And like maybe 90% of the time they're going to go with a big corporate lobbyist or whatever. But some of the time, like with DACA or with, this money that Governor Inslee appropriated recently, sometimes you do get what you want. And that changes, millions of lives. And so one of the unique things about the Trump administration is, on immigration at least, they've totally done away with what we used to have ombudsman and liaison meetings with the private bar and, ICE or these different immigration agencies. And they did away with those immediately. So like, we don't get to talk to the administration at all. And if you're a dreamer or you're, with the ACLU or whatever organization, like you're not getting a meeting with anyone in the executive branch. So there's really no hope for anything good happening. And, with Joe Biden, like he's going to disappoint me in so many ways, but I know like my colleagues who push that sort of thing, who are active in DC, they're going to have meetings with him, and they're going to occasionally extract concessions, which on the face might seem like small things, but when you sit down and meet the families that are impacted, who get to stay with their families because of one of these small things, it turns out to be kind of a big deal. So right. The point about electing Biden isn't like that he's going to do single payer, he's going to like make everything great. But the point is, with Biden, we can activate some of those activist muscles that have been dormant now for a few years, because there's literally nothing to do with this administration.
Yeah. And frankly,
big things.
Small successes breed larger successes, right? I mean, as soon as you get some type of feedback that you can win on occasion, it drives, I think, a determination to win more. That's my my sense of it. And Joe Biden's. I appreciate the call. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
The Joe Biden is going to go into this to the White House in a very different way than Barack Obama did in the event that Biden wins. That is for sure. You're not going to have this sort of like sense of awe and that I think and also the depletion of outside strength. If Joe Biden gets into office, it's not going to be because Joe Biden was a juggernaut in the way that Obama was. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've spoken to people who are concerned about the demobilizing effect if there is a Democrat in power and people aren't freaked out about Trump anymore. But I'm not sure how helpful the kinds of people that we're talking about in this scenario were to begin with.
Right.
Like,
I think, relatively speaking, like, yes, I think there may be some demobilization, but not like you say, like the left is not going to be demobilized in the way that it was with Obama. And by that, I mean, like, one, there is a much further left than there was when Obama was elected 12 years ago. But I'm talking like sort of the progressive movement was very much demobilized when Obama won. And it took sort of years for it to sort of reconstitute itself. That's not going to be the case this time.
Everyone from the progressive left to the legitimately anti-capitalist left is going to be very active under Biden, for sure.
And even like the liberal feminist left.
And this is a perfect example of the dynamic because everybody's got a perception of, at the very least, like, this is an opponent we have a chance of actually like achieving something against.
Well,
not all defensive posture.
I don't know. I think, like I said, they'd be active under Trump. They'd be active under Biden. We got to be active, folks, because the kinds of small wins that we're talking about that are maybe possible if Biden is president, they're not enough. Necessary but insufficient is a phrase I like to use, right? Like the clip we just watched. Trump stands for open racism. He was openly racist towards refugees. People like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, also not the best on refugees, right? Like her last decision, I believe, made it easier to deport refugees. So yes, it is worse when they say the racism out loud. However, the establishment is not unracist, and we need to push further.
All right, couple IMs and we're out of here. Magnus McLaughlin, my nurse girlfriend found some anti-union propaganda posted in the restroom. I'll send you a picture of it to your email. Thank you. Zero Sum Sam. Hello, Sam. I think I succeeded in you pronouncing Nomakee's name. Do I get my first ever shofar? I don't know if it was you. I had so many people who did, but I think it was actually the person who said N-O-M small C K-E-E. Nomakee. Spendy Boy. Sam, a friend of mine is getting consumed by the IDW and the Weinstein brothers. How do I tell him he's following a pointless ideology? Have him listen to this show. Bottom structure. It's entirely the actual reality that RBG had plans to retire under a Hillary presidency. And she was overconfident that America wouldn't elect Trump, leading to this disaster. She was forced to stay on with her bad health. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I know.
No sympathy for RBG. Sorry. I mean, I tweeted something mean about her and people were like, oh, Sam's going to be mad at you. I'm like, I'm sure Sam agrees with me that it was a selfish asshole move for her not to retire under Obama. He might not say it in those words, but come on.
Yeah, she literally said, like, who would you rather see on the bench than me? Which is like something a basketball player says about being in the starting lineup.
Yeah. I mean, if I thought that there was like some value in that lesson for people on Twitter, I mean, but I would, but the reality is, like, she made a large mistaken miscalculation. I'm quite sure that she had that realization before she died. And, so I don't know. And she said, like, I hope that he waits until the after, like, Bottom structure. Regarding a hypothetical civil war, we would likely see something closer to Ireland in the 70s and 90s with domestic terrorism. I just think that's, who knows? Either Jamie and I are overestimating the number of people who will vote for a Dem over a hypocrite Republican, or Sam is underestimating the people who don't like Republicans but believe that Dems are all Satan worship baby killers. I'm suggesting that there's a cohort of people who are sort of in between, and that it's not even partisan. It's just like, that guy's a liar.
I mean, maybe. I feel like no one who would ever vote for a Republican cares about hypocrisy, but there might be a few people.
Champagne Communist. Good morning, Samantha. How are you holding up, buddy? It makes you feel better. The notorious RBG is resting in power with Black Panther now. Kunda. Moon in the lake. Sorry, folks. I'm pissed she didn't step down early in Obama's term. I agree. Can't the GOP pack the court in December? Good point, but I wonder how much time they would have. But yeah. Things in Pelosi's quiver. Rip some papers up behind Trump's back. Yeah, I'm voting out of fear, more fear than in 2016, because the dangers are not hypothetical, but demonstrated. All right, 5 more of these. Bull Prague. Minneapolis community in the area of George Floyd's murder is having a virtual town hall this Wednesday evening to discuss their experiences holding the space for the last 113 days or so. Negotiations with the city and propaganda efforts under the wider media and of the wider media and police. It'll be very informative for other communities. Interesting. DPOV, I'm curious about your thoughts on the movement for a People's Party. I don't recall you talking about their convention that happened a few weeks ago. In my mind, the most useless time to have that convention would have been a few weeks ago. Like, the time to have that convention is, I don't know, around the midterms, or like, it's just, I just think that it's, and frankly, to have Jimmy Dore as one of your lead speakers, you're just basically transmitting that, like, we're not serious about this. This is completely performative. Oh. There's nothing, like, you're going to start the People's Party 4 weeks, 5 weeks before an election. Like, let's just say it was the most boring, inconsequential election in the history of ever. Like, what? Like, honestly, like,
what's the idea that they're basically not going to try to spoil this election, but they're going to contest the next one?
It's just also sort of like, just from a complete, like, just sort of like just basic competence. Like, when can we do this with the least amount of people are paying attention? Like, like this is like, we're just going to get people who are disaffected and angry online right now to do something that is completely performative. How about actually building something?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. If you really want a People's Party to happen, you need to start building it. I think having a convention right now is putting the cart a bit before the horse.
Have the convention in off years where it's like, you're actually saying, we're going to build something that is not contingent upon Joe Biden being the nominee. Like, we're going to build something that is actually around principles that are enduring and are not, you don't schedule the convention like you would like a book release.
Yeah. I mean, even just this level of obsession with what's happening in this election, in which there is not a socialist candidate running, just does not speak well to their understanding of what the party actually means, what a workers' party should be, and what's going to be required of us if we actually want to build one. We talk about this all the time on Antifada. We talked about it last week with Brace Belden. It's so important.
Yeah, the speeches aren't really what matters. I like to hear Cornell's talk as much as anybody, but that's not how you judge political parties.
a lot of people call themselves the party, and that doesn't make it true.
Matt in town. I have fear that Breyer and Thomas's seats will be up for grabs next term. They will undoubtedly. I think they're going to push a justice through soon, but if Trump wins, he'll get Breyer's seat, and Thomas and Alito will be. I don't think Alito will be talked into retiring. He's pretty young, and they'll put more extremists on there. No, but Thomas will retire, and Breyer will retire in the next 4 years. There's very little doubt in my mind. I could see Thomas hanging in there if Biden wins. I could see Thomas trying to hold out until see what happens in 2024. But Breyer, I think, is not going to make it. All right, 3 more of these. Tom, Katie Halper had a law professor on the night RBG died, and he thought expanding the lower courts and or pursuing dissolution of the SCOTUS would be better than packing SCOTUS. Yeah, there's some other theories on it, and we'll explore those in the I don't know if we'll do it in the coming days as much as we will, it's only relevant if the Democrats win the House and the Senate and the presidency. But I think there's an argument to, I think there was a piece in the Atlantic, and I wonder if that one of those law professors from there, to the idea of just basically diminishing the power of the Supreme Court. I mean, I think it should be, or you make it much bigger. I mean, we've been on this kick for quite some time. It is basically, it is very political, as opposed to this notion of judiciary. I mean, I wish I had more time to talk to the professor today about critical legal studies, because a lot of that is sort of like that theory. Okay, 2 more.
Tomorrow is another day.
That's true. Simple socialist, honestly placing an intransigent conservative majority on the court is probably the worst possible decision conservatives make, in my opinion, because it limits all liberal to progressive responses to extreme measures. Like placing a stranglehold on progress just makes the wave that hits after the dam breaks that much stronger. Now, not sure.
Only if liberals do shit, which they may or may not.
Right.
Well, I mean, the left also has no power right now. We're not exempt from this critique. Go out and do stuff.
All right. The final IM of the day. James in Jersey City. Speaking of actuarial tables, when she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 2009, the survival rate for her type of pancreatic cancer, which was caught early, was 1 in 3, and she was 77. All right, folks. Nevertheless, rest in peace. We'll see you tomorrow. Good job, Jamie, Matt, and Brendan. Bye-bye.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I